Chapter 1482. Han Fei seemed to have forgotten what he had done in a daze. In fact, when he swallowed the source water last time, he was in a coma for a long time. Han Fei estimated that the situation this time should be the same as the last time. When he was advancing to the Venerable Realm, Han Fei was so focused that he didn't even look at his own information. After all, the result was the same whether he looked at it earlier or later. In any case, he had already become a Venerable. When he first heard of the Venerable Realm, he was still in the Heavenly Water Village. At that time, the Venerable Realm was still an extremely mysterious realm for him. Han Fei felt that the use of spiritual energy had slowed down, and the fluctuations of his power were also very restrained. All of this showed that he'd already entered a completely new realm. In fact, Han Fei woke up now because the spiritual energy in his body, even the liquefied spiritual energy, was not enough to promote the improvement of his strength. For a long time, the human body lacked spiritual energy and would become hungry. This was common sense even for fishers. At this moment, Han Fei certainly felt it. However, at the Venerable Realm, the improvement of spiritual energy on the body was almost negligible. If there was a big use for it now, it must be the chaotic qi. However, this was exactly what Han Fei lacked now. At this time, Han Fei didn't stop cultivating but tried to decompose the spiritual energy. After all, the 70% dismantling rate of the Venerable Realm was no joke. Of course, Han Fei was also very confident. After all, he was going to become a king. If he couldn't even achieve this, it would be a joke. At this moment, Han Fei's body seemed to be burning. He was using the scorching power in this small world to quickly and massively dismantle the spiritual energy. When the dismantling rate of the spiritual energy reached 50%, Han Fei found that in the spiritual energy, some slight power began to escape. This was not the power of the spiritual qi itself, but the power of the great path contained in the spiritual qi that was dissipating. When Han Fei's dismantling rate of the spiritual energy reached 72%, his cultivation efficiency doubled. However, Han Fei was still dissatisfied, because the method of slowly improving his soul, strength, and physique through the dismantling rate of the spiritual energy was still too slow. Han Fei could tell that if he cultivated at full speed and had enough spiritual spring and energy tubes, his physical strength might be less than 1/10,000th of his current strength after a whole day's work. It could be said that he was far from it. In other words, he wanted to double his strength again through the method of spiritual energy. In that case, it would take at least 30 years. Hiss! Bang! Suddenly, the spiritual energy and energy vortexes around Han Fei were shattered by Han Fei. This speed was too slow. However, a twofold increase in strength was equivalent to a level 80 to a level 81 or level 82. It was even to the extent that I'm unable to attain the peak of the elementary exalt realm, yet I actually need 30 years of time. Who the hell would be able to take it? Even if he accelerated it with Forge the Universe, it would still take 15 years. Suddenly, Han Fei thought of something. Right, could the time in Forge the Universe change as he became a Venerable? Thinking about that, Han Fei closed his eyes and looked at the foggy space inside the demon purification pot. He glanced around and saw the number 2 of 128 in the void under the time chain. This meant that the time in Forge the Universe was twice as slow as that in the outside world. However, what really excited Han Fei was that behind the time chain of light, there was the word, upgradable. Wow! Han Fei clicked on the word and immediately received a message. The message said that to upgrade the time chain, a wisp of chaotic qi was needed. When he saw this message, Han Fei was stunned. Damn, it wasn't easy for him to accumulate a huge amount of spiritual spring and spiritual fruits. However, once he became a Venerable, he found that spiritual energy didn't work at all. Wasn't it a pain in the ass? However, could a wisp of chaotic qi upgrade the time chain of light? Han Fei certainly wouldn't miss such a good thing. Although Han Fei didn't know how precious chaotic qi was, it was nothing compared to the total amount of chaotic qi needed by the entire Venerable Realm. Once the effect of the time chain was increased, even from 2 times to 3 times, it would save him a lot of time. It was equivalent to reducing a task that would take 30 years to complete to 10 years. This sounded crazy enough. Besides, the current little white could also produce chaotic chi. And it could produce a wisp of chaotic chi at once. God was on his side. Han Fei was overjoyed and directly summoned Little Black and Little White. Han Fei immediately hugged Little White, kissed her hard, and said, "Daughter, swallow a wisp of chaotic chi for Daddy." Han Fei knew that this would probably scare the old turtle. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, he also needed chaotic chi. Even if he didn't let the old turtle know now, he would probably find out in the future. But to Han Fei's surprise, the old turtle surprisingly didn't ask anything. Han Fei was curious and couldn't help but ask, "Old Yuan, what are you doing? Did anything happen while I was in the venerable realm?" At that time, the old turtle really wanted to howl a few times, but he managed to hold himself back. He only heard him say, "Woo. You do your own thing first. I have something to think about." Han Fei was puzzled. Why did the old turtle change his temper? However, at this moment, he was only thinking about the time chain. How could he think so much? In Han Fei's sea of consciousness, the old turtle's body was trembling slightly. If Han Fei came over to take a look, he would know that the old turtle seemed to be very scared now. The old turtle's eyes flickered and he muttered in his heart, "Is that the Emperor Sparrow? It's the Emperor Sparrow. Is my turtle life destined to be so rough? The Emperor Sparrow. I just landed on a random person. How did that person awaken the Emperor Sparrow?" This question seemed to have been bothering the old turtle for a long time. Now, he was sure of one thing, he couldn't run away for the time being. He couldn't help but think of Han Guangchu's proposal. Han Fei should be a person with great luck, right? Although dual-talented spiritual beasts were quite amazing, there were indeed such spiritual beasts in this world. However, the one who awakened the Emperor Sparrow's spiritual beast was really rare. The old turtle pondered, if it really doesn't work, should I establish a long-term friendship with Han Fei? At least, after following Han Fei for so many years, this kid was still a loyal and affectionate person. He was just a little bit cruel to the enemy. He was quite kind to his own people. At this time, Han Fei had already summoned Little Black and Little White. Little White seemed to have received some kind of inheritance. When Han Fei said that, he knew what this chaotic chi was. All of a sudden, Whitey's body lit up. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw a strand of hair-like gray mist slowly spit out from Little White's mouth. It was only about 3 inches long. Seeing this scene, the old turtle was shocked. What the fuck is this spiritual beast? What kind of strength did he have to be able to produce chaotic chi? If this thing grows up, how powerful will it be? However, the old turtle still didn't say anything. It was already wondering how to get along with Han Fei in the future. On the other side, Han Fei was already dumbfounded. Is this the chaotic chi? For a long time, Han Fei didn't think it was the source of spiritual energy. Although he had a lot of spiritual energy, he had worked hard to save it. However, now he actually obtained a wisp of chaotic chi so easily. For some reason, Han Fei felt that he wanted to swallow this thing very much. It seemed that this thing was very beneficial to his cultivation. In fact, Han Fei knew that this thing must be an extremely top-level energy. Even the old tortoise had only managed to accumulate a few strands after absorbing for so long. Yet, Little White spat out a wisp of it so easily. "Daddy. I'm so tired, so hungry." Han Fei suddenly came back to himself, only to see that Little Black and Little White were circling each other. This was what they would do when they were about to hibernate. Han Fei's heart did a flip. This chaotic chi must not be simple. Even if Little White could do it, it was still not easy. Immediately, with a thought, a river appeared in Forge the Universe, which was full of spiritual spring water. Little Black and Little White directly went inside. In an instant, the two small fishes turned first and formed a yin-yang diagram. A huge amount of spiritual energy was drilling into their bodies. Although Han Fei still had something to ask Xiao Bai. Han Fei could feel that Little White and Little Black were so tired that they seemed to be paralyzed. Suppressing his desire for the chaotic qi, Han Fei thought of an idea and upgraded the chain of time. On the demon purification pot, a small vine suddenly stretched out. With a gentle scoop, under Han Fei's eager gaze, the wisp of chaotic qi was scooped away. Han Fei was quite guilty at that time. After a brand new energy came out, he hadn't even felt it yet, and he offered it to the demon purification pot. This made his heart itch. When Han Fei looked at the demon purification pot again, he found that the chain of time didn't change immediately, but the words, upgrading, appeared. After staring at it for dozens of seconds, Han Fei saw that there was no change in this message. Therefore, Han Fei very naturally and curiously diverted his attention to his new personal data. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 80, Venerable, Spiritual Energy, 420,000/420,000, Convertible, Chaotic Qi Unconverted Spiritual Power, 55666/79999, Damaged, Perception Range greater than 12,000 kilometers, Power greater than 3,000 waves, First Spiritual Heritage Unknown, Second Spiritual Heritage Unknown, First Spiritual Beast, Twin Yin-Yang Spirit Swallowing Fish, Level 70, Second Spiritual Beast Emperor Sparrow, Level 1, Main Art Heaven Stealing Technique, Level 6 of Void Fishing, Venerable Level. Divine Quality. At first glance, Han Fei naturally looked at the overall situation. His gaze had just fallen on the word, transformable, behind the spirit qi. All of a sudden, he felt a jolt in his heart. He immediately looked down. Shoot! Emperor Sparrow? What the hell? When did I get a spiritual beast? Chapter 1483. At this moment, Han Fei was dumbfounded. Why did he suddenly get another spiritual beast? Usually, one could only obtain a spiritual beast when one's spirit was awakened, right? How did he get a spiritual beast after breaking through to the venerable realm? It had to be said that the experience of forgetting to acquire a gifted spiritual beast was something that countless people had experienced. It seemed that a person could have a gifted spiritual beast as long as they enchanted it. As for what he would gain, it all depended on fate. In fact, the forgetting went both ways. Perhaps it was because spiritual beasts could trust humans better after forgetting their memories. Han Fei felt that the name of this spiritual beast was so strange. Could it be a bird? Could it be that there was a fish called the Emperor Sparrow? After discovering such a major mistake, Han Fei summoned the Emperor Sparrow immediately. Whoosh! With a flash of black light, Han Fei saw a black crow, the size of a palm in front of him. The crow was looking at him with its head tilted, looking rather arrogant and cold. It was clearly a crow, but it was like a goshawk, holding its head high and chest out. Crow. Han Fei felt that he had seen this crow somewhere before. It was just that he did not have any impression of it. Han Fei saw this little thing barking wildly at him. That sound was as if he had been stabbed 3 times. You're the one who's being very fierce, so why are you acting like someone's bullying you? In Han Fei's eyes, information emerged. Name Emperor Sparrow. Introduction. This is a mysterious creature from ancient times, and it is considered inauspicious by all races. DK was born to be a monarch and looked down on both the past and present. The imperial sparrow was the strongest among all the ferocious beasts of the primitive age. Level 1, Quality. Primeval Beast, stored spiritual energy, 10,000 points, food, depends on your mood, battle skill, eye of disaster, remarks, follow the heart of the emperor. Otherwise, disasters will befall you. Remark 2, rumor has it that anyone who kills the Empress Sparrow will die. Hiss, when Han Fei saw the message, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. What the hell did he create? You're only level 1, and you want to proclaim yourself an emperor? Why don't you go to heaven? If a real venerable sovereign saw you, he would definitely kill you. Also, this thing had to be done according to his wishes. Otherwise, would a calamity descend? Was there a mistake? I can pinch it to death with one finger. Looking at the Emperor Sparrow, who was looking at him with its head tilted, Han Fei heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this thing was only level 1. What if he was at the same level as Little Black and Little White? He might not even be able to defeat him. Little Crow, what do you want to eat? Daddy will make it for you. Hiss, the old turtle took a deep breath. Damn it, isn't this a death wish? Sure enough, the moment DK heard this, he let out an ah, as if he had been stabbed by a knife. The old turtle quickly shouted, Han Fei, do you want to die? This was an Emperor Sparrow. Don't ever provoke it. What is a crow? How could it compare to the Arch Sparrow? Quickly apologize. Han Fei. Han Fei was about to ask, how do you know the Emperor Sparrow too? However, all of a sudden, the secret realm where Han Fei was, the space changed and the fire element surged. Although Han Fei had subconsciously absorbed a tremendous amount of fire elements, it was difficult for Han Fei to quickly absorb all the fire elements in the entire treasure trove by himself. He didn't know if this secret realm was useless after the source water was swallowed. At this moment, the energy in the secret realm seemed to be crazily leaping out to the outside world. Crack! The sound of the seal breaking was heard. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw a big eyeball suddenly appear in this secret realm. In that eyeball, blood like magma was flowing, and it stared at Han Fei. The old turtle hurriedly shouted, "Bastard, quickly take back the Emperor Sparrow. There are some things that I'll tell you slowly. Now, try not to provoke the eye of the heavenly path." Han Fei glanced at the little crow and took it back with a thought. What kind of look is that? I'm your master anyway. Can't you give me some face? Dong 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 dong, the eyeball of the eye of the heavenly path seemed to be expanding and contracting. This was something that Han Fei had never seen before. When he fought before, this thing didn't react at all. Now, it was nothing more than becoming a venerable. Was it really necessary? Did the Emperor Sparrow really activate the eye of the heavenly path? Was this big eyeball going to attack him? Wait, suddenly, Han Fei seemed to hear an ethereal melody appearing in this secret realm. When this sound rang, Han Fei's mind was a little confused. He felt that something seemed to have appeared in the endless fire element. Han Fei. Wake up. Love 999. Han Fei suddenly shivered and realized that he had encountered a formidable enemy. Han Fei looked around and saw some flaming figures wrapped in fire element. He didn't know when they had appeared around him. For some reason, Han Fei felt that these figures seemed a little familiar. When Han Fei saw a figure in the fire who was using a sword, he immediately gasped. Is this Sun Mu? There were too many figures around. The old turtle shouted, "Heavenly demons, they're all heavenly demons. I told you not to mess with the Emperor Sparrow. Are you stupid?" Han Fei's face was black. "Old Yuan, watch your mouth. It's my spiritual beast, so I can do whatever I want with it. But tell me first, what are heavenly demons?" The old turtle said, "Heavenly demons are demonic shadows created by the great Tao of heaven from that person's memory world or the path of the great Tao when it punishes or wants to kill a person. These are just the most basic heavenly demons. Try your best to kill them first and see if there are any more." When it came to fighting, Han Fei suddenly became bolder. Just now, he saw his own information and whatnot. "Oh, my strength has increased by more than 1,000 times. How long has it been?" This level of improvement was simply terrifying. If there were no accidents, his pure strength could definitely kill those junior venerables that he had seen. Logically speaking, when he was a peak-level explorer, Han Fei knew that his strength was already comparable to that of a venerable. Judging from the description of Shueishenqi and the old turtle, if it was purely based on strength, a venerable who had just become a venerable would generally have no more than 1,500 waves. Later, in battles, this was also proved. Even a junior peak-level venerable generally had no more than 2,000 waves. This was also the reason why Han Fei could kill a venerable when he was still an explorer. After all, he could defeat 10 people with great strength. Even if your realm was higher and your strength was not as good as mine, I could still kill you. However, the premise was that you had to have a chance. At the venerable level, it was extremely difficult to use secret methods. It was almost impossible to find a secret technique that had no side effects. At least, there shouldn't be one in the Yin-Yang heaven. Even Han Fei's Beast King art had lost its effect after he became a demigod. Their improvement was extremely limited, and Han Fei's current power of nature had almost exceeded this limit. Therefore, secret methods were naturally of little use. Now, Han Fei had just become a venerable, but his strength had already reached 3,000 waves. Some ordinary heavenly talents, even if they were lucky enough to survive until they became a venerable and reached the peak level of a mid-level venerable, their strength was only about 3,000 waves. This meant that in the past, Han Fei needed to use the power of the Great Way to fight with a mid-level venerable. However, he couldn't kill them at all. After becoming a demigod, Han Fei had the confidence to compete with a mid-level venerable. Now, if he used the power of the Great Way, it would be easy for him to kill a mid-level venerable. Boom! Han Fei made a fist mark, and the fist light penetrated the fire element, crushed out a flaming python, and rushed straight at the eye of the heavenly path. This blow was not to blow up this big eyeball. It was just that Han Fei wanted to test how powerful the eye of the heavenly path was. Since Ren Tianfei, the thug patriarch, and old Han could come here several times, it meant that the eye of the heavenly path was not invincible. If he really couldn't do anything, he could use the power of the Great Way to force his way out of the Yin-Yang Palace. At the moment when Han Fei attacked, a large number of so-called extraterrestrial demons had already bombarded Han Fei. The old turtle said, "These are the most basic and ordinary extraterrestrial demons. They should have been created according to your realm. I estimate that they should have the strength of a beginner venerable." Fuck, so powerful. These were not the previous puppets. These were venerables. Previously, the Black Killer Snail King fought with its projection, which gave Han Fei a headache. But now, the Eye of the Heavenly Path was even more unreasonable and directly created extraterrestrial demons of the same realm. He couldn't even remember how many of the opponents he had killed and how much they hated him. Anyway, there were dozens of extraterrestrial demons at a glance. Damn it, it's not easy to defeat them. Bam! 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 Fortunately, Han Fei's strength was much stronger than those in the same realm. Golden fist marks blasted out and smashed these so-called extraterrestrial demons into pieces with each punch. However, after the bodies of these extraterrestrial demons were shattered, they could be reassembled as if they had been reborn. This stumped Han Fei. No matter how weak these extraterrestrial demons were, they were still beginner venerables, not nobodies. Han Fei asked, "Old Yuan, is there any way to completely destroy these extraterrestrial demons?" The old turtle nodded. "I'm thinking that you don't have much chaotic energy now. You haven't even stabilized your realm yet. If you want to kill the extraterrestrial demons, why don't you hide in the small gourd world first? If you leave, they will naturally dissipate." Han Fei was speechless. Damn, is this the answer you give me? I know the answer even if you don't tell me. Bam! At this moment, Han Fei's sacrificing punch blasted through the layers of fire elements and almost hit the big eyeball. In the end, the big eyeball shot out a red light, and his sacrificing punch was actually crushed in the light. Han Fei gritted his teeth. This is not a solution. Blindly attacking the extraterrestrial demons would not only fail to destroy them but also waste his time and strength. It was not worthwhile. Gemini Divine Technique. Han Fei planned to use this technique to buy himself time to enter Forge the Universe. However, under the gaze of the Eye of the Heavenly Path, the Gemini Divine Technique didn't work at all. Helplessly, Han Fei could only fight while setting up arrays. Chapter 1484. Huff. Han Fei gasped for a while in Forge the Universe and sat down on the ground. Little Black and Little White returned to the spiritual spring and began to absorb the spiritual spring. He didn't know if it was because Little White had just spat out the chaotic chi, but the Gemini divine technique almost collapsed in less than 100 minutes. Han Fei took a breath and immediately asked, "Old Yuan, what's going on? Did you see how the Emperor Sparrow came about?" Han Fei was full of questions now. "That thing doesn't look like a good bird. Just because I said a few words to it, it brought me a disaster. Damn it, who can stand it?" The old turtle said leisurely, "You have secrets that I couldn't see at the time. If you ask me, I've only seen the Emperor Sparrow after it was born." "Isn't this your second spiritual beast?" Han Fei's heart did a flip. "Don't you think it's strange that I have a second spiritual beast?" The old turtle shrugged. "What's strange about that?" In ancient times, some people cultivated their strength to the limit and tried their best to have a second spiritual beast. Among them, the simplest way is to create a reincarnation. Because of the infusion of the original body's power and bloodline, the reincarnation is very likely to awaken a powerful spiritual beast. When the old turtle said this, Han Fei immediately thought of Tang Gu. Tang Gu had awakened a legendary-level spiritual beast, the white dragon feather lobster. In a small place like the Heavenly Water Village, it was impossible. It wasn't until Tang Yen appeared that Han Fei discovered the mystery. Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei didn't ask any more questions. However, his situation was different from that of a reincarnation. He looked at his information. At this moment, his second spiritual heritage was displayed as unknown. But before this, the information on this side showed that he had not awakened. This meant that his second spiritual heritage had actually been awakened. It should have been awakened when he took the source water and fell asleep. Like the first spiritual heritage, it was also an unknown spiritual heritage. This showed that the level of the second spiritual heritage was also not ordinary. Considering the disappearance of all the energy fruits in Forge the Universe, it was not hard to imagine how much energy he swallowed while he was asleep. Even in the secret realm, when he woke up, he found that the fire elemental energy and the temperature of the flames in the secret realm had dropped significantly. Now that he thought about it, it should have something to do with the awakening of his second spiritual vein. Han Fei really wanted to feel his second spiritual heritage. However, the second spiritual vein seemed to have been hidden, and he actually did not discover it. There were still a lot of questions. Han Fei didn't dwell on the spiritual heritage but asked, "Old Yuan, do you know the Emperor Sparrow? What kind of species was this? Shouldn't human spiritual beasts all be marine creatures? Why would I awaken a bird?" The old turtle sneered. "There are thousands of races in the world, and any race can become a naturally endowed spiritual beast. What kind of logic was this? I don't know either. After all, spiritual beasts are unique to humans, which are different from our associated spirits. It wouldn't be surprising if you see someone become the companion spirit of a fish in the future." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Isn't that surprising? Tell me, what else is magical?" The old turtle continued, "As for the Emperor Sparrow, it only exists in legends. However, in my era, there was a story about the Emperor Sparrow. That's a true powerhouse, an existence that can stand up to the gods." Hiss. Han Fei's eyes widened. Is it so powerful?" The old turtle snorted. "Do you think that's it? The Emperor Sparrow has always existed only in legends. For example, in my era, it was said that the Emperor Sparrow was quite terrifying. It was said that the Emperor Sparrow led the primeval ferocious beasts and launched a 3,000-year expedition against the creatures known as the divine beasts of creation." Hiss. Han Fei asked quickly, "What happened then?" The old turtle said unhurriedly, "That's all legends. I don't know much about it either. But later, the primeval ferocious beasts and the divine beasts of creation still exist in this world, but they are extremely rare and rarely appear." Han Fei was puzzled. "Wait. Old Yuan. Are the primeval ferocious beasts more powerful, or the divine beasts of creation? Also, how are these creatures ranked? What's the level of the ancient mutants? The old turtle thought to himself, since Han Fei has awakened the Emperor Sparrow, he must be extraordinary in the future. He'd better answer all the questions now. The old turtle said, actually, it's not complicated. There are differences in grades. Ordinary creatures, rare creatures, and exotic creatures are the most common creatures in this world. When they reach the legendary grade, it only means that this kind of creature is very powerful and has a lot of room for growth. And when they reach the legendary grade, they are already extremely rare. The legendary creatures and the ancient mutants are of similar quality. Most of them are descendants of the bloodlines of the ferocious beasts and the divine beasts. They have a lot of room for growth and are extremely rare for ordinary people. However, in this vast sea, there are actually many of them, but ordinary people can't meet them. So, people think that they only exist in legends. Then, the old turtle continued, after that, it's the primeval ferocious beasts and the divine beasts of creation. At this point, it's no longer about quality. These creatures are mostly divided according to the era. As for the mysterious ones, I don't know either. They are indeed very mysterious. Era? The old turtle nodded. Just like the Age of Doom you mentioned, it's different from your current era. The primeval era is also different from the primeval continent, and the primeval continent is still different from the chaotic world at the beginning of the world. In every era, there would be powerful beings appearing. You can't absolutely say that the creatures of this era are stronger than those of that era. You have to fight them to know that. After listening to the old turtle's introduction, Han Fei had a complete concept of the grades of these creatures. So, the Emperor Sparrow is the representative of the primeval ferocious beasts? After all, in his introduction, there was such a sentence, among the tens of thousands of primeval ferocious beasts, the Emperor Sparrow is the best. In a word, the Emperor Sparrow's status was infinitely higher. Of course, the only thing that made Han Fei a little depressed was that this thing symbolized some kind of disaster. Didn't this mean that if he had the Emperor Sparrow in the future, he would become the enemy of the whole world if it was discovered? But now, Han Fei was not in the mood to care about this. What the old tortoise said today touched on too many secrets. Han Fei asked tentatively, Old Yuan, which era do you belong to? The old turtle was silent for a while and said unhurriedly, I was born in the Age of Gods. Han Fei's eyelids twitched. Well, I fucking know. Those creatures fought each other and seemed to be all killed in the end. The giant king once said that the gods fell. So it's about 130,000 years since the current era, right? However, as soon as Han Fei said this number, the old turtle said, the Age of Gods. This is a legendary era. It said that it took 60 million years from the rise of this era to the end. Pooh, Han Fei almost vomited blood. Damn it, what the hell is this? From the end of the gods to the end of the Age of Gods to the present, it's only been 130,000 years in total. Now you fucking say that the Age of Gods has a history of 60 million years. Seeing that Han Fei was furious, the old turtle realized that he seemed to have said too much. So, the old turtle said slowly, This is just a rumor. Maybe I'm wrong. It's also possible that it has a history of 6 million years. However, Han Fei didn't believe the old turtle anymore. 60 million years and 6 million years, there was a difference of 10 times the amount of time. Also, even if the Age of Gods really only has a history of 6 million years, do you think it's a short time? Seeing that Han Fei was still surprised, the old turtle said, Hey. You're already a venerable. Why are you still making a fuss? The period I'm talking about is just collectively known as the Age of Gods in the long river of history. And during this period, I don't even know how many great changes have taken place. Han Fei said leisurely, then Old Yuan, which period of the Age of Gods were you born in? Old Yuan said, I was born in the last million years, which can be regarded as the end of the Age of Gods. Han Fei secretly heaved a sigh of relief, fearing that this old guy would say, I lived through the entire Age of Gods. Then he had to find a way to kill this guy immediately. Han Fei asked, then what about before the age of gods? Is it the ancient primeval times? Old Yuan chuckled. I haven't experienced it. How would I know? It's just that I heard there are a few more eras. But exactly which era corresponds to which era? Who knows? You can ask a god who crossed the age of gods. You'll definitely know. Han Fei was embarrassed and no longer mentioned this topic. Although this secret was quite deep, it was meaningless to him. 60 million years of history. His two lives combined were less than 100 years old. What was the point of studying the history of tens of millions of years? Han Fei glanced at the energy and forged the universe, which had been consumed. Outside, the Eye of Heavenly Path was watching. His strength hadn't been stabilized yet. At this moment, it was really a troubled time. At this time, Han Fei glanced at his information again. Immediately, he was attracted by the transformable option of spiritual energy. Spiritual energy can be transformable. What can it be transformed into? Seeing the word untransformed followed by the chaotic energy, Han Fei had some ideas in his heart. Could spiritual qi be converted into chaotic qi to exist? If so, would there be a limit to his chaotic energy? Chapter 1485. When Han Fei's strength reached the explorer realm, he increasingly felt that the effect of spiritual energy was a bit useless. In particular, the upper limit of spiritual energy that his body could hold was even more useless. In fact, the amount of spiritual energy that the human body could hold was always limited. Even a venerable couldn't force a huge amount of spiritual energy into his body. Even if he could, it would be the result of compression. Fortunately, he had the demon purification pot, so he had infinite spiritual energy to use. After becoming a venerable, the use of spiritual energy became even slower. It was no exaggeration to say that Han Fei felt that when he used spiritual energy now, he was like a person who was used to driving a supercar. It was extremely slow. To be honest, he didn't feel that the use of spiritual energy was slow before. Why did it slow down when he became a venerable? Therefore, it was inevitable to replace the role of spiritual energy. He definitely needed a new kind of energy to replace the role of spiritual energy. However, even so, the role of spiritual energy couldn't be denied. After all, among the venerables that Han Fei had fought, they all seemed to be using spiritual energy. Which venerable didn't fill their body with spiritual energy during a battle? That was what most venerables did. When they fought, they also used spiritual energy. Why was this so? The reason was probably that chaotic qi was not easy to come by. They couldn't absorb chaotic qi from the void as they could absorb spiritual energy. Otherwise, the battle between venerables wouldn't be like what he saw. It could be seen that in the venerable realm, although spiritual energy was not enough for cultivation, it was the most appropriate. In a battle, it was the most appropriate. Venerables could exert the power of spiritual energy more, which was also related to the degree of disassembly of spiritual energy. Han Fei immediately understood the key to this and one of the reasons for the existence of the degree of disassembly of spiritual energy. If it wasn't disassembled, the use of spiritual energy would be even slower. At this moment, Han Fei felt that the spiritual energy in his body was changing. A large amount of spiritual energy began to be automatically disassembled. In his spiritual heritage, the spiritual energy flowing slowly began to decrease, and a strand of gray mist was forming. The old turtle said in surprise, "Are you transforming spiritual energy into chaotic qi?" Han Fei said, "Yes." "What's wrong?" The old turtle pondered for a moment and said, "For streaks of chaotic qi appeared. Your upper limit of spiritual energy exceeded 400,000 points." Han Fei thought to himself, when I became a venerable, the upper limit of spiritual energy didn't increase at the same time. The efficiency of the spiritual energy must have dropped, so the demon purification pot didn't keep up with the upper limit of its spiritual energy anymore. Hearing the old turtle's tone, Han Fei knew that something was wrong, so he asked, "What's wrong? Isn't this conversion good?" The old turtle said, it's not that it's bad, but it's a bit fast. Usually, when a cultivator broke through to the supremacy stage, they would obtain the chaotic energy contained in the heavenly Tao laws. However, it would take several years to slowly transform it. But, you've only just become a venerable and you've already started to transform? It's really unimaginable. This was because all of this was happening within his body, just like his innate ability. Therefore, the old turtle didn't know that it was also one of the abilities of the demon purification pot. Of course, Han Fei wouldn't explain. However, he was attracted by the information revealed by the old turtle. The old turtle said that this chaotic energy was produced by the heavenly Tao at the moment of becoming a venerable and needed to be slowly transformed by spiritual energy. Han Fei was shocked. Old Yuan, do you mean that this process of spiritual energy transforming into chaotic energy can only happen once? Of course. Otherwise, how could there be such a good thing in the world if you could transform your spiritual energy into chaotic energy without limit? Han Fei was stunned. Just now, he was full of joy because as long as he was willing, the spiritual energy in his body could be almost infinite. In this case, he could obtain a steady stream of chaotic energy. But now it seemed that he was still too naive. Since the chaotic energy was so rare, how could he get it so easily? Han Fei clearly felt that the spiritual energy in his body was being consumed rapidly around the few wisps of chaotic energy. This process wasn't fast. The old turtle said that it would take others several years to complete this transformation. However, it only took him 2 hours. Han Fei pondered. Even if the time problem in Forge the Universe was ignored, it only took him 4 hours in the outside world. In other words, it only took the demon purification pot 8 hours to help him complete the process from just becoming a venerable to stabilizing it. When the 4 wisps of chaotic energy appeared in his body, Han Fei could feel that they were swimming freely in his body as if they were examining his body. Han Fei thought, if I only have 4 wisps of chaotic energy, how should I use this thing? I don't want to use them. If I don't use them, are they supposed to be used to save my life? But I haven't seen the power of the chaotic energy. Han Fei felt that the feeling of the chaotic energy swimming in his body was not much different from that of spiritual energy. It just needed to be smoother. Han Fei drove the chaotic energy with his will and tried to gather the chaotic energy on his fist. However, the old turtle hurriedly shouted, Han Fei, are you experimenting with the chaotic energy? Han Fei nodded. Yes. How can I know what it's for if I don't try it? The old turtle said, it's not that I don't mind you experimenting, but aren't you in that divine palace now? A wisp of chaotic energy can provide you with high-intensity combat power for several hours. Are you sure you want to waste it here? Hearing what the old turtle said, Han Fei hesitated for a moment and asked in confusion, a wisp of chaotic energy can provide me with high-intensity combat power for 2 hours? The old turtle nodded. Something like that. However, it also depends on how much power you exert. If you always make big moves, a wisp of chaotic energy won't be enough for you to make several moves. Hearing the old turtle's words, Han Fei smiled. Thus, this strand of primal chaos energy had sealed the power within it. In this way, he could use this power at the critical moment instead of in the form of spiritual energy. This was equivalent to creating a trump card for himself. Although Han Fei understood the chaotic energy, what was its specific combat effect? Han Fei didn't know yet. In fact, Han Fei didn't mind wasting a wisp first, but not now. While Han Fei was thinking about the chaotic energy, Forge the Universe trembled slightly. Immediately afterward, Han Fei saw more blue lines appear outside the boundary of Forge the Universe. Han Fei quickly looked at the demon purification pot and saw the number 4128. Behind it, the words, upgradable, were still hanging. Han Fei clicked on it and saw the consumption of 10 wisps of chaotic energy. Han Fei felt a headache, as if he had returned to the fisherman's realm. In order to get a little spiritual energy, he had to do everything he could. Wasn't he also short of chaotic energy now? But now, fortunately, Little White was here. Although 10 wisps of chaotic energy was a lot, it must be worth it. Han Fei was still not sure about the pattern of the time chain, so he couldn't make a conclusion. However, 4 times the time could shorten a lot of time. Similarly, if the strength of a venerable was doubled, it would take him 30 years of seclusion to cultivate normally, even at his speed. If it were an ordinary person, it wouldn't take him 50 years to double his strength. Han Fei felt that this was also the reason why most venerables grew extremely slowly. Doubling strength sounded scary, but in the venerable realm, one step at a time was a different world. Maybe his strength had already doubled without changing his realm. And Han Fei could at least shorten this time to more than 7 years. This was already a miracle. Of course, in terms of Han Fei's personality, even a year was a long time, let alone 7 years. It took him 7 years to become a venerable from a law enforcer. How could he have the time to cultivate in seclusion? Han Fei sat quietly for half an hour to clear his mind. Emperor Sparrow, let's find a way to get along with it later. He had already become a venerable, and his strength had doubled. His real combat power might even make the advanced venerables flinch. However, that kind of power didn't last long. Because he couldn't test it, everything had to wait until he left this divine palace. The eye of the heavenly path, this weird eye of truth, seemed to have targeted him. God knew why this guy targeted him as soon as he became a venerable. Could it be that the monarch sparrow's voice had called him over? Now, Han Fei knew that he could actually continue to cultivate because he had the power of hope. Han Fei thought that with the massive resources he had stored, he could easily reach the strength of a peak-level junior venerable. However, now it seemed that he was far from it. What Han Fei needed now was strength, which was why he came to the divine palace. But he wanted strength? It was not enough to have the power of hope and spiritual energy. He also needed energy to support it. He had to cleanse his body and make himself stronger. Just outside Forge the Universe, there was endless fire energy, which was inexhaustible energy. If he didn't have this energy, his improvement in strength would just be nonsense. Han Fei thought hard for a long time, left Forge the Universe, and continued to fight the so-called extraterrestrial demons. If he didn't leave, he couldn't improve himself. Therefore, he had to come out in the end. However, after leaving the demon purification pot, Han Fei found that his realm was still not high enough, and his strength was not strong enough. Want to surpass the 1,000 stars? That was absolutely impossible. Even if he temporarily obtained unparalleled power, it would only be a flash in the pan and wouldn't last long. Therefore, after careful consideration, Han Fei summed up 2 ways. One was to return to the central holy city, seek an opportunity, and come back. The other was the palace within the immortal palace. Since it existed, there must be a way to get in. As long as he could get in, he could set up arrays through the barrier and absorb energy, which was also enough for his cultivation. 1 day later. Little Black and Little White finally recovered from their state of exhaustion. Han Fei finally learned from Little White how much chaotic energy he could produce. In a month, he could spit out 1 wisp. The first wisp was converted from the power of his breakthrough. After that, he could basically maintain this amount of time. Han Fei pondered, 12 wisps of chaotic energy in a year. It didn't seem to be much, and he could even deduce some major techniques once. However, Forge the Universe now had 4 times the time. In other words, as long as there was enough spiritual energy and demonic energy, Little White could give birth to at least 48 wisps of chaotic energy a year. Based on Han Fei's understanding of the old turtle and his cherishing of chaotic energy, he could roughly judge that this was a considerable number. In order to increase his trump cards. In order to make himself stronger. In order to make this trip to the divine palace worthwhile and not be chased away by the eye of the heavenly law like a stray dog. Chapter 1486. Swish. Han Fei stepped out of Forge the Universe, and the entire secret realm was filled with fire energy. Oh, no, to be precise, this secret realm had been broken by the eye of the heavenly path. How exactly was it broken? Han Fei didn't know. At this moment, the big eyeball seemed to penetrate countless spaces and hung directly above his head. But it seemed that the big eyeball was not looking at him. The heavenly devil bodies that chased after Han Fei earlier also dissipated because they lost track of Han Fei. Even the eye of the heavenly path couldn't see. How did Han Fei disappear? Or, at this moment, the eye of the heavenly path was like a robot. Once the enemy was gone, the crisis would naturally be resolved. It wouldn't ask whether the enemy was dead or not. Where did he escape to? Questions like these, even if the enemy appeared again, it didn't immediately look at him. It seemed to have forgotten what had happened just now. Or perhaps, it just ignored an enemy like Han Fei. After all, Han Fei was just a venerable now, not worthy of its attention. Even so, the heavenly demons were still condensing. Although it didn't look at him, it didn't mean that it wouldn't attack Han Fei. Seeing that the eye of the heavenly path was not looking at him, Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief and his eyes lit up. At this moment, Han Fei directly came to the huge corpse of the ancient azure dragon with a star transposition. Collect. Han Fei's Forge the universe at this moment, after continuous expansion, had become very large. An ancient azure dragon's corpse was still big enough. Fortunately, this ancient dragon's corpse was just a skeleton without any signs of life. Otherwise, if such a thing were to enter Forge the Universe, Han Fei wouldn't be able to gather enough resources to put it into Forge the Universe. Han Fei's speed was already very fast. From appearing to collecting the ancient dragon's corpse, it only took Han Fei 3 seconds. 3 seconds were basically the time taken by Forge the Universe to collect the ancient dragon's corpse. And during this period, in front of Han Fei's eyes, those so-called heavenly demons reappeared. This time, Han Fei tried to directly rush out of the entrance of this secret realm. However, since these so-called heavenly demons were born, there was no reason to retreat. Countless fists smashed at Han Fei. Boom! Boom! Han Fei also punched furiously, bombarding the sky. A hole was blasted open in the gray secret realm, leading to the outside world. Whoosh! When Han Fei appeared in the outside world, the extraterrestrial demons followed him like shadows. In the outside world, the heavenly Tao Dharma I was gurgling with tears of lava. Not long after the lava fell, it evaporated into endless fire elements, as if it could burn the entire universe. Noticing the change of the eye of heavenly path, Han Fei was slightly surprised. Was it the same eye of heavenly path that he saw in the treasure trove? Why is it different? Hiss! Han Fei slapped his forehead and suddenly realized that the eye of heaven's path could observe every place in this world, and he could only see it through different environments. Therefore, it was normal for it to have different appearances. Therefore, what he saw was still the same. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. When the power swept over, Han Fei didn't fight back but escaped in an instant with his speed and talent. The most important reason was that this battle was not taking place in the void, but on top of the immortal palace. After all, the Yin-Yang Sky General was his home. Did he destroy his own home just to fight with something that didn't even exist? No matter how he did it, he would always lose money. It was also thanks to his strength, which was far beyond the realm he showed. Han Fei easily got rid of the group of extraterrestrial demons and was already looking for the entrance to the immortal palace. Damn it! We've got all the source water. Can you at least open the door? Han Fei tried to open the barrier while fighting. He thought that after fusing with the source water, he could go in. However, it still didn't work. Han Fei wondered, if this immortal palace is not for me, then who is it for? Old Han. My sister. In less than 10 minutes, Han Fei had blown up dozens of extraterrestrial demons. Fortunately, these extraterrestrial demons were just the lowest level extraterrestrial demons that the old turtle said could only fight with brute force. If these extraterrestrial demons could be killed with spiritual power, Han Fei wouldn't dare to wander around in the immortal palace with so many people. The old turtle said, "It seems that the eye of the heavenly law doesn't take you seriously." Han Fei sneered. "It's just that my realm is too low to make it feel threatened. If it were a half-king, I'm afraid this thing would have to fight in person." After walking around the palace hundreds of times, Han Fei suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Yes, this palace has a circular appearance. This is not surprising, but this shape really made Han Fei's imagination run wild. Yin-yang sky, yin-yang sky. Fuck, are you kidding me? With a thought, the supreme yin-yang image appeared. The moment the supreme yin-yang image appeared, it rotated, and right in front of Han Fei, a yin and yang gate appeared out of thin air. Smack! Han Fei slapped his forehead. I'm really stupid. This place is called yin-yang sky. The switch here must be related to yin and yang. Even if he lost one of them, he wouldn't be able to enter. At this moment, as soon as the supreme yin-yang image appeared, Han Fei immediately went in through the gate. The moment Han Fei entered the palace, the whole world seemed to be quiet all of a sudden. Outside the restriction, the violent energy and spiritual qi were unable to penetrate the restriction at all. In this restriction, spiritual energy was abundant, and the energy was not weak at all. It was even richer than outside the restriction. Han Fei was not in a hurry to cultivate. Since he had come in, he had to take a walk. If there was no accident, this should be his home, right? After entering this restriction, Han Fei clearly saw the scene inside this restriction. Although the pavilions, terraces, and towers were not like the classical buildings he knew, they had a different style. Very similar to the Waterwood Immortal Palace, there were land, trees, and rocks inside this restriction. It was said to be a palace, but at this moment, it looked more like a courtyard. From the layout of the courtyard, the small bridge, the flowing water, the flowers and trees, and the quietly standing pavilions, they all complemented each other. This scene made Han Fei feel the beauty of nature and ecology of the integration of nature and man. Among them, what attracted his attention the most was the palace-like pavilion he saw outside. This pavilion did not occupy a large area, like a large villa standing in a natural fairyland. The structure and decoration of the pavilion were integrated with some style elements of the Age of Chaos. It seemed to be closer to nature. Along the milky white sandstone pavement, Han Fei soon came to the center of the courtyard of the small building. The door of the small building was completely open, as if it didn't care who entered. Seeing that it was quiet all around, Han Fei walked into the building naturally. The small building was divided into a front and a back, with 2 floors. Below, Han Fei saw some decorative furnishings and some papers on a table. On a side table in a corner, he also saw 2 ancient books and a fish skin map scattered. Han Fei strode over and opened the fish skin map, on which there was a complex pattern of a pestle. Han Fei couldn't help looking at the restriction outside the courtyard. Is this pestle controlling this restriction? Han Fei put down the fish skin map, picked up the 2 books, and casually read them, only to find that they were just some miscellaneous information before the Age of Chaos. Also, it was obvious that they were not written by me. They seemed to be from the human world, talking about the appearance of some heroes in the Age of Chaos. How did people fight against the Sea Clan? Dropping the 2 books, Han Fei walked to the table, wondering what he had written. But it was not words at all, but 2 small fish, one black and one white. Han Fei stared at them for a while, and the yin-yang fish above seemed to begin to move again, attracting Han Fei's attention. This is the yin-yang fish map, also known as the nature map. With this map, you can cultivate spiritual power by visualizing it every day. While Han Fei was staring at the map in a daze, he suddenly heard a soft voice next to him. Who? At this time, Han Fei tilted his head, only to see a beautiful woman in white, with loose hair, looking at him with a gentle face. The old turtle exclaimed, I didn't notice anyone approaching. This beautiful woman seemed to be able to see through Han Fei. Reaching out and pointing, the old turtle's voice disappeared without a trace. Needless to say, he was sealed again. Anyone who could see the old turtle was basically capable of killing him, but there was no need to do so. Han Fei knew what the beautiful woman did, but he still said in a daze, I. The beautiful woman smiled. Do I look old? Han Fei shook his head quickly. Of course not. You don't look old at all. You look like a little girl. Puff, the beautiful woman said lightly, you should have guessed that I'm just a projection now, right? Han Fei nodded. Of course he could. If she were here in person, she would have appeared a long time ago. Before Han Fei asked anything, she looked at the yin-yang fish map and said, if there is yang, there is yin. People also have two sides, one yin and one yang. Yin and yang are also called yin and yang. The combination of yin and yang is the origin of all things. This is the origin of the yin-yang sky. Han Fei couldn't help but stretch out his hand and scratch his head. And then? Han Fei's mother said, in the beginning, all the Taos were the Tao of yin and yang. Whether it is the heavenly Tao, the earthly Tao, or the human Tao. Everything had two sides, and they were constantly changing, so there was a certain connection between them. The Tao of yin and yang is reflected in these Taos. Han Fei was puzzled. However, Han Fei's mother just said these words and then said, the 36 Xuantians actually represent the 36 great Taos. Every family thinks that they are the strongest. From the initial convergence to the later division, they fight separately. This is the root cause of the destruction of the various immortal palaces. Han Fei asked, then what is the ranking of the Tao of yin and yang? Old Mother smiled faintly. There's no specific ranking. I think it should be ranked first, but the consensus of the world can only be ranked ninth. So, don't care what others think. What you have to do is to walk out of the yin-yang sky as soon as possible and integrate the 36 Xuantians. Wow! Han Fei couldn't help but take a breath. I don't even understand the yin-yang sky. The problem of the sea race hasn't been solved yet. Now, they are already thinking about integrating the 36 Xuantians. Isn't this a bit too much? Seeing that Han Fei was stunned, she said, just try your best. Even if you can't integrate them, you have to have the ability to protect yourself and the peace of one side. In the past, some people went east to search for the world. Some people defended and fought their way out of the 36 Xuantians. However, with the erosion of time, the 36 Xuantians are no longer what they used to be. If you don't want to be destroyed, you can only work hard to survive. Obviously, the purpose of this mother's projection existing here was to tell him about the 36 Xuantians. Perhaps she had some feelings for him, but after all, she was not a real person. She probably couldn't be as spiritual as a real person. Han Fei suddenly asked, where are you? Chapter 1487. Han Fei asked straightforwardly. He felt that there must be a big secret behind this. His mother and old Han had paid such a huge price, even stealing time and causing a conflict with the great Taos of the universe, to finally create him. How could there be no secret behind this? It seemed that since the heavenly desolation city, the trajectory of his life had been slightly deviating. He would also go to other places in the 36 immortal palaces. After all, old Han and the other parents were not there, so his sister could only be picked up by himself. Han Fei's mother looked at Han Fei quietly. This is not something you can know now. This matter is complicated. I can only say that I'm not in your era now. I'm temporarily trapped in a place. How to go back is something your father should consider. You have your own things to do. Han Fei frowned. Am I still a chess piece? His mother shook her head. You have never been a chess piece. It's just that fate has destined you to take a path. What is the scenery on this path like? Whether it was me or your father, we have no way of knowing. From the moment you left the yin-yang heaven, this was your own path. Han Fei shrugged. It was said that fate was fickle. But his fate seemed to be doomed. However, he didn't care about this now. Compared to him, old Han and his mother should have paid an unimaginable price. Otherwise, the yin-yang heaven wouldn't be like this now. What made Han Fei smile was that his mother felt that the yin-yang great Tao was actually the strongest among the 36 immortal palaces. Of his 3 great Tao, the left and right great Tao could be changed at will. However, he was still hesitating about the middle Great Tao, and he was even prepared to keep delaying it. As long as he didn't limit the middle Great Tao to one Great Tao, he would have countless Great Tao. In Han Fei's view, this kind of ability was extraordinary and not something that one or two Great Tao could compare with. Now that he had talked about the 36 Xuantians with his mother, Han Fei thought to himself, that's too far away. I'd better push myself to the peak first. Han Fei said, Mom, I have a few questions. I haven't got a golden page in the reincarnation ideal palace. What should I do? Old mother shook her head. My projection doesn't have any relevant information regarding this. Han Fei was lost for words. Mom, may I ask why old Han attacked you and the fetus with the sea-quelling painting? Did my eyes deceive me? There are a lot of things that you don't understand because you haven't grown to an extremely strong level. Indeed, your eyes deceive you. Then why don't you explain it to me? That involves a big secret. It's not that I don't want to say it now, but I can't say it now. The eye of heaven's path is extremely sensitive to certain words. Han Fei thought of something. Then, can you tell me your name? I was stunned for a moment, and then I said, my surname is Jiang Linxian. In the future, if you meet someone with this surname, you must be careful. Han Fei nodded. The name doesn't sound special. However, left and right were just code names. Surname Jiang. Could it be that I'm also a disciple of some big clan? Soon, Han Fei finished his questions. Han Fei asked again, what's the relationship between me and the Master of the Waterwood Heaven? In the end, I told him that the palace master of the Waterwood Sky had already fallen back then and had been hiding all this time. So, Han Fei immediately understood. That made sense. The Life Queen seemed to know the Yin-Yang Heaven better than him, but in fact, she must be pretending. She and I were not born in the same era at all, and we became kings at different times. Therefore, the Life Queen probably valued him because of the glory of the Yin-Yang Heaven. Browsing the library in the small building, Han Fei saw a large number of top-level cultivation techniques and combat skills. Han Fei immediately asked, Mom, do you know how to obtain the 7th level of the true spirit fishing art? Jiang Linxian was slightly taken aback. Do you practice an ancient method? Ancient method? Han Fei couldn't help but wonder, does this mother know the true spirit fishing art? Jiang Linxian said, I don't know when this technique was created. At least, in the era I know, it is incomplete. Even if it has been passed down, its effect must have been greatly reduced. Therefore, at least at the beginning of the Age of Doom, the true spirit fishing art you mentioned is no longer a good technique. Han Fei thought to himself, it's not just not a good technique. When I was reincarnated, this true spirit fishing art could be said to be one of the weakest techniques. However, she continued, but I heard that there is a secret behind this technique. Therefore, the latter part is rarely circulated. If you want to find the latter part of this technique, you can go to the Taishian Heaven of the 36 Mysterious Heavens. The Taishian Heaven has always collected all the techniques in the world and is the only one of the 36 immortal palaces that doesn't care about worldly affairs. Taishian Heaven. Han Fei silently remembered this name. At least, he now had a direction. Han Fei was really afraid that the 7th level of the true spirit fishing art was the end. The 7th level corresponded to the King Realm. Although he was still a long way from the King Realm. However, this meant that theoretically speaking, he had to become a king before he could deduce the 7th level. But Han Fei had already made up his mind to deduce the 7th level of the true spirit fishing art when the time was right. He was already used to the lightning bombardment. After a moment, Han Fei was taken around the courtyard by his mother, and she said, the array of the immortal palace collapsed in the war back then. Although the restriction guarding the courtyard is not weak, you can't live here. So, it's time for you to clean up the heavenly eye. Han Fei's eyes widened. Wait. I still don't understand the principle of that big eye. How can I clean it up? Jiang Linxian said, the heavenly eye is a manifestation of the rules of the Great Way. I broke the rules, and that's why I attracted its attention. It's not difficult to get rid of the heavenly eye. As long as you move away from the place it pays attention to, it will also go away. Huh? Han Fei was surprised. You mean I have to move the immortal palace away? Outside the yin-yang heaven? Then it will leave with me. It's the ideal palace. Jiang Linxian said, the heavenly eye has always been looking at the ideal palace, but the heavenly Tao doesn't see living beings, so it appears in the immortal palace. Moving the ideal palace was one of the methods. There is another way, and that is to find your sister and bring her back. As long as she enters another reincarnation and fuses the old body with the new one, everything will be restored. The heavenly eye will also dissipate. Han Fei was surprised. Neither of these two methods was simple. Moving the immortal palace? That's easy for you to say. But where? The waterwood heaven or the wall of death? The narrow passage of the waterwood heaven couldn't even cross such a large floating island. Just how many resources would it take to send a giant floating island over there? Besides, would the Life Queen be happy if he moved it over? As for the wall of death, well, the Black Killer King had already become a king, and he hadn't even been able to come over yet. Although he didn't know whether he dared not or couldn't come over, at least it was very difficult for him to send someone over. Did he want to send a huge floating island over? It didn't sound reliable. Besides, even if he sent it over, how dangerous would it be inside the wall of death? The floating island that he had painstakingly sent over would be gone in less than 2 days. The other way was to find Yin-Er. However, Yin-Er was still in some corner of the glass heaven. So far, he only knew the yin-yang heaven and the waterwood heaven. At most, he could call it the golden crow heaven. Of course, with the nautical panorama, it wasn't difficult to find them. However, the premise was that he had to leave the yin-yang heaven. This road might take him a long time. And how could he become a king? Han Fei said, is it because I have the heavenly eye that I can't become a king? Jiang Linxian shook her head slightly. Yes. However, it shouldn't be troublesome to go to the glass heaven. Don't underestimate your speed and don't care too much about the distance. When you can become a king, these are all trivial things. Han Fei was helpless. What else can I do? I should continue to cultivate first. In any case, it would take time to become a half-step monarch realm cultivator. During this period, he could clean up the big families in the Thousand-Star City. Han Fei asked, what about that dragon? His dragon corpse is with me. I don't have to return it to him, right? Jiang Linxian smiled faintly and said with light steps, in history, the human race once dominated the world and fought against the dragon race. However, this hostile relationship was only temporary. In the vast wilderness of time, any race can fight against any other race. This dragon corpse is actually not very useful to you. You might as well return it to him. After all, it's also a favor. Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, it may not think so. Jiang Linxian smiled and said, it has no choice. Back then, this dragon traveled through the void and picked up treasures in the void. It just so happened that he encountered the Eye of Heaven's Tao, and his soul was almost destroyed. If it weren't for me, it would have died long ago. However, this dragon has guarded the immortal palace for tens of thousands of years and has repaid the favor. Han Fei continued, so, if I return its dragon corpse to it and let it be reborn, it will owe me a favor? Jiang Linxian smiled slightly. Yes. Han Fei thought, so that's how it is. The Azure Dragon probably doesn't even know that it owes a favor and now it has to pay it back with 2 favors. Han Fei also made up his mind. In fact, the dragon corpse didn't matter. He didn't really lack divine weapon materials. This ancient dragon corpse might not be able to refine a sea-quelling bizarre treasure, so he might as well give it back to him. However, when exactly would he return it? It depended on his mood. Chapter 1488. To Han Fei's surprise, his mother's projection mark stayed in this palace for a full hour this time. although the two of them were chatting about the secrets of the 36 mysterious heavens. But he finally found a bit of familial love. Han Fei had two questions in his mind. He was wondering if he should ask them or not. Jiang Linxian said, "I don't have much time. This projection will disappear in a moment." Han Fei took a deep breath, and with a thought, a small vine appeared in his palm. He didn't let the demon purification pot appear completely, because the demon purification pot was too mysterious, so mysterious that he was the only one who knew this secret. This was also the reason why Han Fei had been thinking about how to deal with the old turtle. Seeing this small vine, Jiang Linxian was slightly taken aback. Familiar. However, there is no information left in my projection. Since it hasn't been left, it means that this thing is very important and should be kept secret. Keep this thing for yourself. If the turtle in your body can't be subdued, then kill it. When saying the last sentence, Jiang Linxian deliberately removed the barrier so that the old turtle could hear it. Hiss. The old turtle just felt that he could hear it, but he was so scared that he trembled all over. How the fuck can a random person see through me? The old turtle said, "Han Fei, our turtle clan is one of the clans best at keeping secrets." Han Fei said, "What are you afraid of? Let's talk about it later." Since she didn't recognize the demon purification pot, Han Fei didn't plan to show it all. However, Han Fei then asked, "Well, which one is more powerful, the twin yin-yang spirit-swallowing fish or the emperor sparrow?" Jiang Linxian's pupils constricted slightly, and after a long time, she said, "It turns out that it is the fish that awakened the origin water. Your luck is much more complicated than I thought. You need to verify it yourself. No one in the world knows which one is more powerful. However, they have one thing in common. They want to be secretive." Han Fei asked, "Is there an enemy?" Jiang Linxian nodded. "When you go to the other 36 mysterious heavens, don't trust anyone. Time has passed, and people's hearts are fickle. You need to pay special attention to the Grand Pure Palace, the Wuji Palace, and the God Refinement Palace." Han Fei looked solemn. "To be singled out by me, it can only mean that these immortal palaces are probably enemies." Seeing that Jiang Linxian's body was starting to turn illusory, Jiang Linxian took Han Fei to a training field in the courtyard outside the building. It was a strange thing that was pieced together on the ground. It looked like a huge machine. Its form was naturally arranged according to the yin-yang fish diagram. However, outside the yin-yang fish diagram, there were countless layers of formations. Jiang Linxian, this is the yin-yang palace's heaven and earth natural array. It's an exquisite array formation derived from the grand beginning, yin and yang, for symbols, and 8 trigrams. On the table, there was a picture of a pestle. After I leave, you can enter the formation and experience the endless changes within. If the eye of the heavenly Tao disappears in the future, you can fully activate this formation, and its might will be able to stop a king. Han Fei was shocked. A king's attack? What kind of situation would they come under? Han Fei said, "Okay." Jiang Linxian smiled faintly. "One last thing, the statue of the sea god can be changed. If you want to enter the 36 profound skies again, your strength cannot be weak. You need the entire yin-yang heaven to hold the fort." Jiang Linxian left. Han Fei guessed that this might be the last time she appeared in the yin-yang heaven. If they met again, she would at least have the ability to cross the river of time. As far as Han Fei knew, even an Emperor Realm cultivator couldn't cross the river of time easily. However, he was different. There were 3 great paths. Why couldn't he walk on the great path of time? After she disappeared, Han Fei was amazed by this heaven and earth natural array. It was too fucking exquisite. It was as weird as the infinite stairs in the God's Memorial Tower. Heaving a sigh of relief, Han Fei immediately went to fetch the pestle. It was called an array pestle because Han Fei could use this array at will. Of course, the premise was that he had to understand it thoroughly. When Han Fei walked to the center of the heaven and earth natural array, he immediately felt that his body was spinning. According to the law of the heaven and earth natural array, he was sitting in the middle axis. This yin and yang array was an array that absorbed energy and spiritual energy. It was made up of countless exquisite arrays. If what she said was true, could the heaven and earth natural array resist a king? Then, he could just sit cross-legged in it and cultivate. Because this yin and yang array would automatically absorb the power of the outside world, and the power absorbed could be comparable to the attack power of a king. He didn't have to worry at all. Han Fei did as he said. After all, Han Fei was really dissatisfied with his realm. He thought that his reserves of resources were enough for him to reach the peak of a junior venerable. However, he ran out of energy fruits, and then he ran out of spiritual energy. Fortunately, he had accumulated a lot of power of hope before. It was a pity that he had to use all his hard work to cultivate. With a thought from Han Fei, the power of hope began to penetrate his body. In the array, a huge amount of fire energy began to gather. Outside the palace, above the sky of the yin-yang sky, a huge flame vortex with a diameter of 2,000 meters suddenly formed. A huge amount of energy was drilling into a certain point in the forbidden area of the palace. However, the infinite fire energy did not fill the yin and yang array, but went into a weird place, which was undoubtedly Forge the Universe. Forge the Universe could absorb external power, which depended on Han Fei's will. At the same time, it also depended on where it was. What was worth absorbing? Generally speaking, Han Fei put all the good things in Forge the Universe. Therefore, both the spiritual energy and the energy here were far higher than in the outside world. But now that the energy was gone, he could only absorb it from the outside. Han Fei felt refreshed, and his flesh and blood were continuing to strengthen. In his body, the 4 streaks of chaotic energy swam quickly. The spiritual energy tides didn't stop, one wave after another. This was Han Fei's real seclusion. He didn't expect that he would seclude himself in this way in the yin-yang sky. Time passed day by day. Because the time inside and outside was different, after the fire energy flowed into Forge the Universe, Han Fei had enough time to use it. In this way, about a month later, Han Fei finally completed a small breakthrough. 3 months later, Han Fei once again completed a small breakthrough, and at the same time, accumulated 3 strands of chaotic energy. 6 months later, Han Fei finally reached level 83. In the 7th month, the power of hope was exhausted, and Han Fei suddenly opened his eyes. He knew that this was the limit. Without the power of hope, it was impossible to rely on pure energy and spiritual energy. However, at this time, Han Fei had accumulated as many as 11 strands of chaotic energy. However, this wasn't enough. Although Little White had been working very hard to produce chaotic energy. However, Little White couldn't be completely reduced to this production tool. Once he left the Yin-Yang Palace, he needed Little Black and Little White to maintain a good state. 1 year later, Han Fei cultivated for 5 months with energy and spiritual energy, mainly to wait for himself to save a sum of chaotic energy before leaving. A year in Forge the Universe was about 3 months in the outside world. Plus, he had stayed in the God's Memorial Tower for more than 2 months. It had been almost half a year since he left the Scattered Stars Island. Han Fei glanced at his information. Owner Han Fei, level greater than 83, venerable, chaotic energy greater than 16 strands, spiritual power 5860179999, damaged, perception range greater than 15,000 kilometers, power greater than 3,688 waves, first spiritual heritage unknown, second spiritual heritage unknown, first spiritual beast, twin yin-yang spirit swallowing fish, level 70, second spiritual beast emperor sparrow, level 1, main art avoid fishing, level 6, sky stealing technique, venerable level, divine quality. Han Fei wasn't surprised at all when he saw this data. Compared with when he became a venerable, the benefits after his breakthrough were much smaller. But Han Fei didn't care. He improved fast at the beginning, but he didn't improve enough. He could make up for the shortcomings and polish his foundation well. However, he had to improve his realm first. As for the disappearance of spiritual energy, Han Fei wasn't surprised at all. Although the spiritual energy was still in use, in fact, in a sense, it was already obsolete. Swish! Han Fei appeared in the heaven and earth natural array. The old turtle said, "Why, are you cultivating again? I told you that your realm is improving fast, but your foundation is not polished enough. You'll be stuck in the realm of a junior venerable for a long time." Han Fei grinned. "No, there is another way to speed up the improvement of strength." The old turtle asked, "Are you going to fight?" Fighting was the best way to polish one's foundation. And Han Fei's fighting method was particularly different. He could also absorb other people's vitality and soul power, which could benefit him in all aspects. In fact, at Han Fei's level, if he wanted to gain enough benefits in a battle, he had to choose venerables as his hunting targets. The old turtle wondered, "You're not going to the Thousand-Star City now, are you?" "No, you can't. You're not strong enough." "Huh? Are you going to attack those sea demon venerables who escaped?" Han Fei smiled. "What do you think of my idea?" The old turtle said leisurely, "It's not a big deal. As long as they unite, you, a junior venerable who hasn't even reached the peak, can't kill them. How can you hunt 5 or 6 of them? Don't forget that the projection of the Black Killer Snail King hasn't died yet." Han Fei grinned. "So, I still need to do some preparation work." In terms of strength, without the help of the power of faith, his progress was very slow. Han Fei regretted that when he looted the Zhang family's treasury, he shouldn't have looted the lower 5 floors. In this way, he could have gotten a huge amount of resources. As the saying went, to do a good job, one must sharpen his tools first. Han Fei closed his eyes and glanced at the great techniques he had learned. Now that he picked them out one by one, he needed to deduce them all to the extreme. Chapter 1489. Han Fei reviewed his experience during this period of time. When his body and physique became extremely strong, he didn't even like to use the draw technique and preferred to solve problems with his fists. Such a combat method was relatively simple. But the fundamental reason was that at his current level, it didn't matter what kind of weapon he used. In this case, he might as well use his fists. Therefore, the current saber scripture needed to undergo a relatively large deduction. After entering the Divine Palace this time, Han Fei found that it was not easy to defeat puppets with his fists. Therefore, the 100 Beasts soul-suppressing roar also needed a breakthrough. Fortunately, Han Fei already knew that the next level of the 100 Beasts soul-suppressing roar was the 100 Beasts soul-devouring art. It should be a great art that could be used to attack and kill. Having deduced the attack technique and the soul technique, the only thing that Han Fei needed to improve was the 108 Desolate God body. The cultivation of the indestructible Overlord body was very difficult, but he had already embarked on this road. However, Han Fei's soul power had been overconsumed and was in a half-damaged state at the moment. In a short period of time, Han Fei was in a state of hunger and thirst. At this time, if he practiced a body-refining art at the same time, the effect might be better. Very soon, Han Fei found the art that he needed to deduce. They were the saber scripture, 10,000 knives in 100 beasts soul-suppressing roar, 108 desolate god body, and finally the art of deception. The reason why he needed the art of deception was to ensure that he would be foolproof when he pretended to be someone else. However, how much spiritual energy would be consumed in this way? At least 2 billion spiritual energy would be consumed. Han Fei glanced at Forge the Universe. Fortunately, spiritual energy and demonic energy belong to the same nature and level of energy. Otherwise, the resources that he had accumulated would have been used up long ago. After a moment, the old turtle saw that billions of spiritual energy and demonic energy in Han Fei's Forge the Universe were sucked away by the demon purification pot. 3 streams of chaotic chi were even hooked away by the little vines in the process. This scene stunned him. What kind of deal did Han Fei make this time? Why does he need so much chaotic chi? It seemed that Han Fei had a big plan this time. Such a huge consumption was enough for a venerable to cross a realm, but Han Fei didn't seem to have done anything. After half an hour, many great techniques had emerged in Han Fei's head. Small Blade Manual, Venerable Level, Divine Quality, Note, a collection of hundreds of saber techniques and battle skills from different clans. A comprehensive saber cultivation technique that includes saber intent, saber realm, and one with the saber. The saber Dao was to send out the saber with a thought. Everything could turn into a saber. Deduction Consumption, 10 strands of chaotic energy. Special note, there is only one move in the book, Blade Draw. This was the advanced version of the saber scripture. This time, Han Fei directly deduced it to the venerable level and divine quality. What's there to save? In the future, none of the people he would face would be simple. If he didn't have some great techniques to protect himself, his heart wouldn't be at ease. If he were to rob them, what would his consumption amount to? During the deduction, Han Fei also consumed a bit of chaotic gas. This, Hinayana Saber Manual, inherited the characteristics of the saber scripture, and only used one move. However, drawing the sword became drawing the sword. If he had the chance, he would have to try it out. Of course, there were other techniques. Blade Purgatory, Venerable Level, Divine Quality, Note, a technique to control knives. Hundreds of millions of knife lights are shot out at the same time. Everything in the purgatory can be turned into a purgatory. Everything in the purgatory can be turned into a knife. As long as the spiritual power is strong, the knife will not stop. Drawbacks, requires a lot of weapons and high spiritual power. Deduction Consumption, 10 strands of chaotic gas. This technique was different from the Hinayana Saber Manual. If the Hinayana Saber Manual was a powerful killing technique, then this Blade Purgatory was a domain-type killing technique. As long as his spiritual power was strong enough, he could even fly 1,000 kilometers away with this Blade Purgatory. Blade Draw and Blade Purgatory were both offensive techniques, which could greatly improve his range of combat and single combat abilities. Han Fei was also very satisfied with the soul attack. 100 Beast Soul Devourer, Venerable Level, High Quality, Introduction. This is a technique created by 10,000 beasts. By learning the roars of beasts, you can mimic fierce beasts and devour souls. This is the soul killing technique, a secret technique of the beasts. Deduction Consumption, 10,000 beasts. Image Deduction Consumption, 1 strand of chaotic gas. The 100 Beast Soul Devourer technique was similar to the 100 Beast Soul Suppressing Roar. The difference was that one used sound to shock the soul, while the other turned the sound into a beast roar in the enemy's head, as if 100 beasts were tearing the soul apart in the mind. Therefore, this was the significance of the 100 Beast Soul Devourer. The reason why Han Fei didn't deduce it further was that he had only stayed in the Beast King Valley for a short time. He might be familiar with the beasts, but he had never seen 10,000 beasts. Therefore, he planned to save some chaotic gas. At this moment, he had an offensive technique that included the soul attack. Although the Great Desolate Body art appeared, Han Fei didn't continue to deduce it. The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly. Great Desolate Body art, Venerable Level, Mid-Quality, Note, an ancient great technique that was passed down in the Desolate era. It refines the physique into one acupoint, allowing it to devour demonic spirit chi, savage baleful chi, poison, and transform it into energy to nourish the physique. It was said that those who mastered it would be immune to all evils and poisons. Drawbacks, you may go berserk if you fight too hard. Deduced art, unknown completion, 1 wisp of chaotic gas. The school of body tempering was different from other combat skills. Body tempering required a solid foundation step by step. If one practiced by leaps and bounds or practiced at a relatively high level, it would not only be difficult but also a waste of time in the absence of a solid foundation. Finally, there was the deduced art of deception. God-deceiving technique, Venerable Level, Divine Quality, Introduction. On the basis of the art of deception, infiltrate the face, voice, and aura of the soul that is close to you. After being deceived by the God-deceiving technique, the other party will be less wary and trust you. Deduced art, unknown deduction cost, 10 wisps of chaotic gas remarks. The sky-deceiving technique can confuse the other party's mind and deceive them with words. The practice of this great technique also wasted a wisp of Han Fei's chaotic gas. Although the art of deception was actually enough, the group that he was in contact with now was different. Even an emperor like the old turtle couldn't hide from old Han and the others. God knew how good the eyes of a half-king were. Since then, Han Fei had consumed a total of about 3.8 billion spiritual energy and demonic energy, and 3 wisps of chaotic gas. And these great techniques would also lay the foundation for Han Fei's future growth. The purpose of coming to the immortal palace had been achieved. He had obtained half a drop of origin water, which inexplicably helped him awaken the second spiritual heritage and the second spiritual beast, but Han Fei didn't notice the second spiritual heritage. Although there was still a massive amount of energy and an annoying eye above the immortal palace, however, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get the eye of the heavenly law for the time being. If he could get rid of it, old Han and the others wouldn't have left it for him to do. Since the eye of the heavenly law was still there, the immortal palace was far from being as good as he thought. Alas, the masters of the big clans still tried to enter the immortal palace to get the opportunity to become kings, if they knew that once they entered the immortal palace, they would be closer to the eye of the heavenly law, and not only would it be impossible for them to become kings, but they might also attract the attention of the eye of the heavenly law. Another month passed. Han Fei browsed through the books in the palace. Han Fei didn't need books such as cultivation methods and combat skills. Even if the immortal palace had kings' great techniques, it was still a matter for kings. There were a few books that he couldn't obtain at all now, and he needed a certain amount of strength. The rest were mostly about various historical events that happened before and after the establishment of the 36 Xiantian realms in the end of Dharma age. These books were easy to obtain, and Han Fei didn't even need to do anything. In these books, Han Fei saw that in the era when the city of Yu was still in existence, the 36 Xiantian realms were not only fighting with the Sea clan, but also fighting among themselves. It turned out that before Shiman Linglan and the others, someone in the 36 Xiantian realms had discovered the floating stone. Later, this news was circulated among the strong masters and had been kept secret, in order not to attract the attention of the Sea clan. Han Fei couldn't help but sigh. So, when the City of Justice was about to collapse, the secret of the floating stone had been completely exposed. Otherwise, how could the sea demons ambush in advance? Looking through the books one by one, they were all about how to save the world in the end of Dharma age. On this day, Han Fei was fighting with those extraterrestrial demons outside the palace. After fighting for more than an hour and studying the saber drawing technique, Han Fei returned to the barrier. Han Fei smiled heartily. Old Yuan, it's time for us to leave. Han Fei strolled through this courtyard palace for the last time, thinking to himself, the next time I come here will be when I reach the top. It was a pity that he couldn't take away the massive amount of energy and resources in the immortal palace. Even the power of the fire element in the outside world, he had only devoured 1% of it since he started cultivating. Did he want to move the Yin-Yang Palace away at once? It was too early to think about it. Han Fei grabbed the pestle of the heaven and earth natural array and thought to himself, should I take this pestle away? Or should I keep it? While he was in a daze, Han Fei suddenly felt that some lines on the pestle seemed quite familiar. Huh? Han Fei was shocked. On the golden page he obtained in the ideal palace, there were the words, Heavenly Book, which he didn't recognize at all. However, on this pestle, Han Fei saw a few similar symbols or words. To be exact, there were 3 of them. These 3 words seemed to be on every page of the golden scroll. But now they appeared on this pestle. Huh? What's the mystery in it? Han Fei immediately grabbed the pestle and ran into the heaven and earth natural array. This time, Han Fei didn't know if he could understand the mystery. But he still had to try. Han Fei activated the Tao Seed, and with a thought, the 7 golden pages appeared in front of him. And in these 7 golden pages, a dim black light emerged, which was fabricated by Han Fei out of thin air. Han Fei stretched out his finger, used his finger as a pen, and slowly wrote the 3 words on the pestle on the dim page. The 7 golden pages of the book suddenly closed. Following that, with a bang, the dim golden page broke into pieces. Obviously, the ability of the power of Tao to create something out of nothing was still limited. But in the next moment, to Han Fei's surprise, although the golden page was broken, it didn't dissipate. Instead, it sank back into his body and didn't split any more pages. And in Han Fei's mind, a piece of information also appeared. All things 3, unrated, incomplete. Note, it can separate one person completely and turn them into 3 people. It can also create 2 external incarnations. According to the cultivator's will, the external incarnation will recultivate from childhood. Moreover, the external incarnation is not connected to the main body's soul. Disadvantage: if the external incarnation is not connected to the main body's soul, the external incarnation will easily develop its own will. Deduction consumption: 10 wisps of chaotic gas. Note, according to the bloodline and potential of the master, the external incarnation can ignore the barrier of level and the tribulation of heavenly power to a certain extent. Chapter 1490. Myriad Things 3. Hiss. When Han Fei was still in the Empyrean waterfall, he had heard Granny Yin talk about 2 legendary techniques. One was the Big Dream Heavenly Book, and the other was the Myriad Things 3. Now, the Big Dream Heavenly Book had been repaired by his father. And what he got on the trip to the Ideal Palace was the Myriad Things 3. Before, Han Fei tried his best but couldn't find a way to create an incarnation. As a result, after a trip to the Waterwood Heaven, the water deity created an incarnation for herself with her original body. Now, he was able to create 2 more avatars. However, even if he wanted to, his soul power didn't seem to be enough. Wait. Han Fei suddenly remembered that if he let his incarnations start cultivating when they were young, wouldn't they be reincarnated? If the level of the Myriad Things 3 was the same as the level of reincarnation, then it shouldn't be much worse than the Big Dream Heavenly Book, right? Indeed, if he really started cultivating when he was an ordinary person, his soul power wouldn't be consumed much. Looking at the words in the remarks, Han Fei was tempted again. The incarnations created by the Myriad Things 3 could ignore the barrier of level and the tribulation of heavenly power. Did this mean that as long as his original body kept growing, there would be no barrier for them? Even if his original body passed the tribulation, they wouldn't have to pass the tribulation. Han Fei browsed through it and noticed that the bloodline, luck, and potential of the host would affect the bloodline, luck, and potential of the incarnations. It was a pity that he couldn't read more, because the All Things 3 was incomplete. If he wanted to see the complete version, he needed to deduce it, which would consume 10 wisps of chaotic gas. Han Fei hesitated for a long time. The Myriad Things 3 was useless now. According to this book, the higher his realm, the stronger his bloodline, and the greater his potential, they would affect his incarnations. So, he shouldn't cultivate incarnations when he was only at the venerable level. At least, he had to wait until he became a king. He had to admit that the Myriad Things 3 was definitely an amazing precious technique. Just like Tang Yen, who knew how many paths he had secretly paved for his reincarnation. Even so, he failed to become a king. But what was the Myriad Things 3? They were his avatars, and they could carry the fate and potential of his main body. So why did he place them in the Yin-Yang Heaven? In the outside world, the world was vast. If you were limited to a place like the Yin-Yang Heaven, even if you had great luck, there wouldn't be so many opportunities for you to take. The reason why he could get to where he was today was actually the result of the joint efforts of many people. Therefore, Han Fei made up his mind to put the All Things 3 aside for now. Even if one's great technique could shock the heavens, it still depended on when to use it. What kind of environment? Instead of deducing the Universal 3, Han Fei said to Old Yuan, "Let's go." Buzz. Han Fei still brought the pestle of the Heaven and Earth Nature Array with him. If he didn't come, no one would be able to enter the Heaven and Earth Nature formation. When Han Fei appeared outside the palace, those heavenly devil shadows all appeared and besieged Han Fei. Han Fei stretched out his hand and made a pinch in the air. A fiery blade was pulled out of the void by him. Whoosh! The fiery blade light slashed out and cut off all the attacks. Han Fei smiled and teleported so fast that the heavenly devils couldn't keep up with him at all. The teleportation array flickered, and when Han Fei appeared again, he was already on the third floor of the temple in the central holy city. As soon as Han Fei appeared, he saw Ren Tianfei sitting cross-legged not far away, still cultivating. Seeing Han Fei's sudden appearance, Ren Tianfei couldn't help but ask, "So fast?" Han Fei asked, "It's been 7 months. Is this still fast?" Ren Tianfei said, "It's just 7 months. It's just a nap. The Eye of Heavenly Path didn't do anything to you, did it?" As he spoke, Ren Tianfei observed Han Fei's strength and slightly frowned. "A peak-level junior venerable? How did your strength improve so quickly?" Ren Tianfei didn't feel good. Once a cultivator reached the venerable realm, it was almost impossible for them to make any progress. Every point of improvement would take a lot of time. In a flash, Ren Tianfei already knew the key reason why Han Fei became stronger. He said, "Although the power of faith can help you improve at an incredible speed, you have to improve your foundation." Han Fei sneered. "Got it. I'm not stupid. I won't blindly pursue a higher level. I'm not stupid. I won't blindly pursue a higher realm." Seeing Han Fei's calmness, Ren Tianfei was relieved. He couldn't help but ask, "So, do you have a solution to the Eye of Heavenly Path? How can you make it disappear?" Han Fei curled his lips and said, "I do have a solution, but it takes time and strength." Ren Tianfei heaved a sigh. "The stronger you are, the less you seem to be a match for it. The Eye of Heavenly Path is best at creating heavenly devils. The higher your level, the more powerful the heavenly devil will be. Have you ever experienced it?" Han Fei thought to himself, "The heavenly devils I've met are the most common ones. I think it's because my level is not high enough. So, the Eye of Heavenly Path just created 2 random heavenly devils to tease me?" Han Fei said, "When I'm strong enough, I'll naturally experience the power of the heavenly devils. Now I just want to know, from the central holy city to the 1,000-star city, do I have to go back the same way?" This was the key that Han Fei cared about. If he could only go back the same way, needless to say, someone must be ambushing him. After all, old Han, Ren Tianfei, and the thug patriarch all seemed to be able to fight against the big families. His relationship with them was even worse. Ren Tianfei said, "Of course not. There is only one way to come in. However, no matter which way you go out, the central holy city is only so big, and you will be ambushed eventually." Han Fei was stunned for a moment. "You mean, I can go in all directions?" Ren Tianfei said proudly, "Of course. It may be difficult to enter, but it's very easy to leave. If you want to leave, I'll go with you. I haven't been to the 1,000-star city for a long time." Han Fei quickly said, "Don't. It's not the time to completely fall out with the 1,000-star city. Wait for my news as to when the big families will be cleaned up. Now, I don't think they can catch me if I run away." Ren Tianfei said in surprise, "So confident. Do you know that although you can go out from any corner, you certainly can't escape the perception of the venerables? There will even be half-king experts watching you from time to time. Are you sure you can escape the pursuit of a half-king?" Han Fei grinned. No matter how powerful a half-king is, he is not a king after all. With that said, Han Fei sat on the ground, took out a lot of fish skin maps, and began to draw arrays. One day later. Outside the central holy city. In the God's Memorial Tower, many old pedants were looking for the entrance on the 5th floor. Someone said, "This is not working. There are no traces to follow. That kid Han Fei actually has a way to remove the marks here." Someone sighed. "Unfortunately, I don't know how many floors this God's Memorial Tower has. Now, at least the first 5 floors have been determined. If these old guys knew that the God's Memorial Tower had more than 200 floors, how would they react?" outside the god's memorial tower. Indeed, many venerables in the dark had covered the entire range of the central holy city with their perception. Since Han Fei dared to go straight inside, he must know the way. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come. Therefore, even a fool would think of ambushing Han Fei when he came out. A venerable said, "Can't we put pressure on the Scattered Stars Island?" Someone shook his head. Now, Han Fei's reputation on the Scattered Stars Island is too high. The Scattered Stars Island is developing rapidly. It's the same with or without Han Fei. A venerable said with an ugly face, "Damn it, Han Guanshu and the others are elusive and hard to find." Someone shook his head. They have concerns. If they really want to take action, they will appear. These guys are not easy to deal with. If we leave the Thousand-Star City, we'll leave the Thousand-Star City empty. Isn't that what they want? At this moment, old Monster Chu was sitting cross-legged in the void. Behind him, King Chu said, "Ancestor, since Han Fei is not on the Scattered Stars Island, why don't we take the opportunity to destroy his base?" Old Monster Chu snorted. "Do you think you can destroy the Scattered Stars Island as you want? Even if you join hands with the Black Corpse Snail, that place can't be destroyed. Not only because of Han Guanshu and Tang Yen, but also some hidden masters. Do you really think they don't care about that place?" King Chu nodded. "Ancestor, you're right. Then we have to capture Han Fei here. No matter how long it takes, we have to capture him." Old Monster Chu said, "Yes. This time, we have to make sure nothing goes wrong." Suddenly, Old Monster Chu disappeared into the void. King Chu followed closely behind and shouted, "Do it." Old Monster Chu and King Chu didn't expect that Han Fei would come out so soon. What could he accomplish in that place after only a few months? However, when Han Fei suddenly emerged from the central holy city, the power of the Great Way, the heavenly void divine walking technique, the agility of wind, and the acceleration array directly made Han Fei's speed soar to the extreme. A powerhouse of the Yi family also shouted, "This boy has become a venerable. His speed is extremely fast." Old Monster Chu shouted, and a long map appeared in the sky, locking the void. In Forge the Universe, the nautical panorama was spinning. Han Fei suddenly roared, and then he launched a terrifying blow, which was comparable to the peak-level blow of an advanced venerable. Old Monster Chu was surprised. How is it possible? Many people were dumbfounded. Could it be that Han Fei also borrowed the force this time? He could launch a peak-level blow of an advanced venerable with a single slash. And this was not enough. Han Fei flashed in the void and directly escaped from the space imprisonment. Old Monster Chu's face was dark. How did Han Fei know where the array eye was? But Han Fei sneered in his heart. Since it's an array, there must be an array eye. Unless you block it with your own great way, if you trap me with an array. Humph, I have the nautical panorama. Why should I be afraid of your array? Seeing that Han Fei was about to disappear into the void, a cold voice sounded, "Time freeze." Chapter 1491. Han Fei saw a dense blue light that seemed to cover half of the sky. When Han Fei heard the sound of "time freeze," his heart skipped a beat. Han Fei quickly looked at the ring of time in his hand, only to see that the ring of time was glowing. Ha! The corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly, and with a swish, he broke through the so-called time freeze space. Originally, Han Fei had a deep understanding of the great Taos of time and space. The acceleration and deceleration of time were very terrifying. And the great Tao of space was also impossible to guard against. King Chu was shocked. Han Fei could actually ignore his great Tao of time. The other venerables were also surprised. How long had it been since the full-scale war on the Scattered Stars Island? It had only been less than a year, but Han Fei had not only become a venerable, but his strength didn't seem to be at all like someone who had just become a venerable. What's more, he could even block King Chu's great Tao of time. If Han Fei was given a little more time, wouldn't it mean that no one in the entire Thousand-Star City could suppress him? Needless to say, Han Fei knew that the entrance to the lower world from the Thousand-Star City must have been blocked. At this time, he couldn't run to the entrance, so he could only stay in the Thousand-Star City. Bam. Ordinary people had no idea that in the void above their heads, many venerables had stepped into the void. Their figures flickered in the void like light. Among them, the fastest were the three people. One was Old Monster Chu, the other was a peak-level venerable, and the other was Han Fei. Although the venerable of the Yi family was also fast. The strongest person of the Yi family was killed by Old Han when the Faceless Man attacked the Thousand-Star City last time. The strongest had died, and the latecomers hadn't grown up yet, so they were left far behind by these three people. Han Fei's heart did a flip. It seemed that it was the Chu sect who was really determined to deal with him. Without the support of the Chu sect, the other big clans didn't have the ability to attack him at all. In this case, Han Fei thought of two places in his heart. One was the Chu sect, and the other was the Chao family. He could go to these two places. If he went to the Chao family, they were more low-key, and he might not be able to display his skills. Also, although Chao Tianji went to the battle on the Scattered Stars Island, Chao Shuang also killed a sea demon venerable apart from Chao Tianji visiting Tang Yan. In other words, even though the Chao clan had made a move, it wasn't very effective. He had done both good and bad things, and his attitude was unclear. It was not good to offend him now. Han Fei immediately made up his mind. Want to kill me? Sure. If you have the ability, kill everyone in the Chu clan first. The Chu sect and the Chao family were two large clans with independent islands in the Thousand-Star City. Han Fei waved his hand and a few fish skins bloomed. These formations naturally could not stop Old Monster Chu. However, Han Fei didn't need to stop him at all. When the fish skin was unfolded, the void was enshrouded in a mist that extended for dozens of kilometers. And Han Fei had already used the Gemini Divine technique. However, as early as in the God's Memorial Tower, after Old Monster Chu was fooled by Han Fei, he knew that Han Fei could create doppelgangers. Therefore, this old fellow was also very crafty. He slapped the entire fog with one palm. Boom! Crack! Feeling that something had been crushed by him, King Chu was overjoyed. Puff! Just when King Chu felt that he had succeeded, Han Fei's figure quickly broke out of the fog. Vomiting a mouthful of blood, he flew all the way south. And Old Monster Chu waved his long sleeves, and the fog in the void disappeared. His perception swept through every grain of dust in the void. Even so, Old Monster Chu was still worried. Be careful, everyone. This kid can create doppelgangers. Be careful when exploring the void. After using the Gemini Divine technique, the strength of Han Fei's white mist body dropped greatly. However, even so, it still caught up with the speed of an advanced venerable. At this time, someone was intercepting him on the road ahead. Han Fei roared, punched out the sacrificing punch with all his strength. Boom! Everyone who saw Han Fei's punch, including Old Monster Chu, was sure that this was Han Fei's real body. If it wasn't his real body, how could he exert such a powerful force? The venerable who intercepted Han Fei was only an intermediate venerable. He was blasted thousands of kilometers away by the sacrificing punch. In the sky above the Thousand-Star City, the sound of explosions rippled non-stop. Countless people raised their heads and looked at the sky, wanting to see what was going on. But how could ordinary people see the battle between venerables? It was this attack that had drawn Old Monster Chu over. His hands missed and he was about to catch Han Fei. At this moment, Old Monster Chu's face suddenly changed drastically. Gate King. Old Monster Chu was horrified. Just now, he had clearly checked the fog thoroughly. It was impossible for someone to exist without being discovered by him. However, just now, a black fog appeared out of thin air. Although King Chu's speed was fast enough, a teleportation array had appeared in front of Han Fei's black mist body. Swish! At the moment when King Chu arrived, the teleportation array had collapsed. How could he find the black mist? At this moment, old monster Chu grabbed Han Fei's white mist body. However, Han Fei smiled coldly. Old monster Chu, let's play a big game today, how about it? As soon as he said this, Han Fei's body collapsed. At this moment, the Venerable's perception swept across the entire thousand-star city. However, there were hundreds of millions of people in the thousand-star city, and all kinds of things were happening all the time. How could they sweep them all with manpower? Waves of air fluctuated from old monster Chu's body. Han Fei, if I do it again, you will never be able to escape. Old monster Chu couldn't have guessed that he did slap Han Fei to death just now. However, he only slapped half of Han Fei to death. Just now, the black mist body died and the white mist body escaped. Now the white mist body was crushed and the black mist body escaped. At that moment, Han Fei had no time to enter Forge the Universe. Fortunately, the characteristics of Little Black and Little White were still there. If one side didn't die, the other wouldn't die. The white mist body was blasted into dust and naturally couldn't be found. And Han Fei also deeply realized that old monster Chu's power was enough to crush an advanced venerable with a slap. This old guy almost slapped him to death just now. On Cold Moon Island, the Chu sect occupied this place. The nautical panorama stopped in front of an ordinary small house. No one saw that a black shadow imperceptible to the naked eye quietly entered the courtyard. Get lost! Bam! In the courtyard, there was a roar, and there was the sound of porcelain being knocked over. Immediately afterward, a woman's timid voice said, "Young master, the highly skilled doctor in the clan said that it is possible to restore my spiritual heritage by taking medicine every day." Bullshit. How many times has the highly skilled doctor in the clan come to see me over the years? They have completely forgotten me, Chu Xiao. It's ridiculous that I, a heavenly talent, am reduced to a lowly person after my spiritual heritage is damaged. Young master, let's go. Although my spiritual heritage is greatly damaged, I haven't become a good-for-nothing, and I don't need others to serve me. Young master. A moment later, Han Fei saw a girl with mediocre aptitude running to another hut in tears. However, the little girl didn't listen to Chu Xiao and left, but just ran into her room and cried. Chu Xiao, Han Fei was looking for him. Han Fei didn't know many people in the Chu sect, so he couldn't go to Chu Qingyan, could he? This Chu Xiao, who was burned by Han Fei with the scorching sun true fire and his spiritual heritage was destroyed by Han Fei, could he? How could he change his spiritual heritage? He needed to change his destiny. Even a venerable couldn't easily change it. Therefore, even a venerable couldn't do anything except to seize another person's spiritual heritage. Did he want to repair Chu Xiao's spiritual vein? That was also extremely difficult. At this moment, Chu Xiao was sitting sloppily on the bed with a pale face. Want to cultivate? But every time spiritual energy gathered, he always coughed. Cough, 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 hum. Suddenly, Chu Xiao only saw some shadows of plants appear. He thought it was his illusion, but when he closed his eyes and opened them again, he suddenly found that he had appeared in an ancient forest. And in front of him, there was a person sitting, a person he had dreamed of countless times. Chu Xiao gnashed his teeth and said, Han Fei. Han Fei smiled slightly. You are not dreaming. Yes, it's me. It's really hard for you. After so many years, you still remember me. Chu Xiao clenched his fists. Even if you turn into ashes, I will still recognize you. Having said that, Chu Xiao didn't dare to move. Why would Han Fei find him? This was the Chu sect. How could Han Fei be on the Cold Moon Island? Chu Xiao asked warily, what do you want to do? Instead of answering, Han Fei smiled and said, it seems that no one in the Chu sect can help you repair this damaged spiritual heritage. Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes. Of course, he knew how powerful Han Fei was now. He didn't miss any of Han Fei's deeds. Especially a year ago, Han Fei had become the supreme commander of the Scattered Stars Island and led millions of soldiers to fight against the sea demons. This made Chu Xiao lose the desire to take revenge. After all, the two were not on the same level at all. He had long admitted that Han Fei was indeed a peerless heavenly talent and that he couldn't compare with him. Chu Xiao said coldly, "A venerable can't repair spiritual heritage. All this is thanks to you." Han Fei shrugged. "It's indeed because of me, but a venerable can't do it." "That's not true. It's a bit difficult, but in fact, as long as you spend a little time, it can be repaired. Also, if there are dozens or hundreds of ultra-quality spiritual fruits, you can recover at least 30% to 50%. After that, I can regenerate my broken meridians with lightning speed. It's not impossible to repair it." When Chu Xiao heard the hundreds of ultra-quality spiritual fruits, he snorted. "That's easy for you to say. Hundreds of ultra-quality spiritual fruits. I couldn't even get one in my heyday. A few hundred? Are you dreaming?" Han Fei smiled and said, "Look, there are many ways to save you. It's just that those people of the Chu sect think you are useless and refuse to let you use them." Chu Xiao said coldly, "What do you want?" A wicked smile appeared on Han Fei's face. "Me? Nothing much, I just wanted to chat with you and borrow your body. Of course, if you're obedient, I can also help you repair your spiritual meridian." Chu Xiao was shocked. "Are you really that kind?" Han Fei shrugged. "Of course I don't have good intentions, but the Chu sect doesn't have good intentions towards you either. Do you think the Chu sect doesn't know my identity? Do you think it was a coincidence that they asked you to stop me? Do you think you are being used by others without knowing it? It's really sad." Chu Xiao's heart shook. He had been thinking about this for a long time. Han Fei had been making trouble in the Thousand-Star City for a long time. Who stopped him? As early as that year, he had guessed that he was being used. However, at that time, he was a heavenly talent and wanted to make some achievements. Therefore, at that time, the Chu sect was hostile to Han Fei, and he also regarded Han Fei as an enemy. Over the years, Chu Xiao's life had fallen to this point. Therefore, his resentment against Han Fei had already turned into resentment against the Chu sect. Chu Xiao thought, "What do you want to do?" Han Fei shrugged. "Let me take a look at your soul first." Chapter 1492. Han Fei didn't intend to pretend to be Chu Xiao. After all, Chu Xiao was already a useless person. He couldn't even get in touch with the middle-level members of the Chu sect, let alone the senior members of the Chu sect. His strength had fallen from the law enforcer realm to the realm of a peak-level hanging fisher. He didn't have the face to go out and wander around in the family. And Han Fei was looking for this guy. Although Han Fei trusted the god-deceiving precious technique very much. However, even the top precious technique was not as practical as a real person. After looking at Chu Xiao's soul, Han Fei had a general grasp of the position and layout of the entire Chu sect. As for the relationship between the characters, Han Fei just did a simple understanding. Han Fei calculated with his fingers and then released Chu Xiao. In front of Chu Xiao, Han Fei turned into a black mist and quietly returned to forge the universe. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, I'll leave this Chu Xiao to you. I'm going to the Soul Sea." The old turtle was speechless. Han Fei's luck is unparalleled. Of course, he knew why Han Fei was going to the Soul Sea. A wisp of black gas slowly penetrated into Chu Xiao's body. The old turtle sighed in his heart. Han Fei is so bad and has awakened the spiritual beast of the King Sparrow. He shouldn't be a character that can be easily killed. Unconsciously, the old turtle had slowly played his role. He didn't argue with Han Fei anymore. Now, he was just a little sad for the Chu men. He thought to himself, of all the people you can mess with, why not? Why did you have to provoke this little devil? Great, I guarantee that your spiritual beasts will suffer heavy casualties. In Forge the Universe, a complex and mysterious pattern appeared. Han Fei hadn't entered the Soul Sea for a long time. During the last tour of the Blood Sea Divine Wood City in the Waterwood Heaven, Han Fei went there once, upgraded Little Black and Little White, and then came out. The reason why he didn't go to the Soul Sea was that there was no such environment. Han Fei had learned a lot about the secrets of the Soul Sea. Only by devouring spiritual beasts with owners would he not trigger the unknown horror and be kicked out of the Soul Sea. This was a very important rule of the Soul Sea. Han Fei's consciousness suddenly came to another world and appeared directly on Little Black. However, before Han Fei could see this Soul Sea world, he heard a cry above his head. That cry sounded like it had been stabbed by a knife. Who else could it be other than the Emperor Sparrow? Han Fei looked up and saw the proud Emperor Sparrow looking at him with his head lowered. The Imperial Sparrow is standing on Blackie? Han Fei was confused. But then again, that should be the case. He was a dual-talented spiritual beast. They couldn't be separated, could they? Since they appeared together, it was normal for them to be together. However, Han Fei couldn't afford to offend DK at this moment. He said telepathically, "DK, let's go eat and drink." In fact, Han Fei's goal was a spiritual beast above level 70. There must be very few spiritual beasts of this kind. Killing one would be a great loss to the Chu sect, and it would be the best for the growth of Little Black and Little White. Little Black and Little White happened to be level 70, which was the level of an explorer. With Little Black's teeth, he could eat all the spiritual beasts within level 10. It could even be said that he could try devouring spiritual beasts above level 80. Xiao. At this moment, Little White completely understood what Han Fei meant. It wasn't the first time that the two of them had cooperated. Only the Emperor Sparrow was looking at Han Fei and Little White curiously. He was waiting with great interest to see what they were up to. Outside, Old Monster Chu and the others were having a meeting in the void. Old Monster Chu said, "This boy is cunning and has the ability to clone himself. Besides, his other clone is pure black, which can avoid perception and vision. We can only detect its existence through the surrounding space. You've all seen this kid's strength. If we let him go this time, I don't know how strong he will be in the future. With this boy's character, it's not just the Chu sect that he wants to take revenge on. The other clans were also helpless." Someone said, "Old Monster Chu, even you failed to subdue him. What other methods can we use to kill this kid now?" Old Monster Chu said, "Since he has appeared, he must go back to the Scattered Stars Island. Otherwise, how can he grow if he stays in the Thousand Star City? The Thousand Star City doesn't have an environment for venerables to grow quickly. Therefore, he must leave. What you need to do is to guard the checkpoints. I don't believe that he won't show up." While Old Monster Chu was having a meeting with a group of venerables, Han Fei had been lingering in the Soul Sea for a long time. It was not that Han Fei didn't want to take action, but because he was looking for a suitable place to do so. In the big clans, there was a clear hierarchy. The strong had their own residences, and not everyone could spy on them. Therefore, after avoiding dozens of independent and powerful spiritual beasts, Little White had been swimming toward a valley in the Soul Sea. Half an hour later, Han Fei saw a 100-meter-long giant serpent covered in pitch-black scales. Han Fei knew that he had arrived at the place. Soon, Han Fei saw a bronze-colored giant turtle, an octopus with a tentacle as long as 100 meters, a big shell engraved with colorful patterns, a purple and silver-colored ribbonfish floating vertically in the water, and a large conch with countless tentacles stretching out, looking like a sea anemone. There were a lot of creatures. Nearly half of them were explorers, and most of them were level 69. It could be said that level 69 was the realm of explorers. The number of these spiritual beasts was as many as 1,000. This didn't mean that the Chu sect alone had 1,000 explorers. Han Fei didn't believe that the Chu sect would have more than 1,000 explorers. To be exact, the owners of these spiritual beasts were also stuck at level 69. When their masters couldn't make any progress in their cultivation, they often chose to cultivate their spiritual beasts. After all, if their spiritual beasts became stronger, it was equivalent to them becoming stronger. Therefore, many of these more than 1,000 spiritual beasts were stuck at level 69. The strength of their masters limited their growth. The cultivation tower of the Chu sect. This was a cultivation tower specially built for the outstanding disciples of the Chu sect. Each floor had a different room, representing a different level. Chu Luo was in seclusion, trying to break through to the semi-venerable realm. As long as he broke through this realm, with his spiritual beast, the purple feather ribbonfish, he could even serve as a sparring partner for those who had just entered the venerable realm. Suddenly, Chu Luo's spirit shook, and he felt that there seemed to be a voice calling in his soul. However, at this moment, he was wholeheartedly devoted to cultivation and thought that he might become a semi-venerable. He was a little excited. In the Soul Sea, Han Fei turned into Big Black, whose body had expanded 5 or 6 times and was gnawing crazily. In just an instant, a big ribbonfish was gnawed into a sieve by Han Fei. Ah, the king sparrow's cry was no longer as if it had been stabbed, but full of aggression. It was a little curious, so it went up and took a bite. Han Fei hurriedly said telepathically, "Be careful, these creatures are of a very high level. You may not be able to withstand them. I'll take you to eat some low-level ones later." Ah, the king sparrow screamed at Han Fei discontentedly, thinking, "Are you looking down on me? I'm the king sparrow. Can't I even eat food?" The king sparrow pecked and followed Little Black to drink soup. After a while, it drank a lot of blood. And Han Fei saw that the king sparrow's body was glowing. After a while, it jumped once, after a while, it jumped again. In just a while, the king sparrow's level suddenly rose from 1 to 9. It seemed to be a little full. After drinking about a mouthful of Little Black's blood and a mouthful of meat, the king sparrow flew to Little White's forehead, seeming to have a sign of a breakthrough. Han Fei thought to himself, "I told you not to eat too much. Look. Although you're improving quickly, you can't reach the sky in one step." However, Han Fei was also very surprised. How could a level 1 creature swallow the energy of an explorer? If it were an ordinary creature, it would definitely die. For example, if he caught a broken explorer-level creature and threw it into an army of marching sea leeches, would it be the marching sea leeches that would die? Or would that explorer-level creature die? The result was likely to be the annihilation of the marching sea leeches. What about the explorer-level creatures? He might even be able to hang on to his last breath. After all, the body of the marching sea leeches couldn't bear the huge energy of high-level creatures. However, the king sparrow was different. It kept drinking blood and eating meat and leveling up 9 times in a row. When it was full, it ran to Little White's head and closed its eyes to rest. Nothing happened to it. Han Fei didn't care about this. Now that he had found the place, he had to seize the time to stuff himself. Not all the explorers were fools. Perhaps one person might not have noticed the anomaly, but not all of them would not have noticed it. Once they summoned their spiritual beasts, Han Fei wouldn't be able to eat them even if he wanted to. So, Han Fei bit a flood dragon. Who cares who it is? I'll eat it first. In the Chu sect cultivation tower. Soon, someone noticed that something was wrong. While Han Fei was gnawing, someone sensed that their spiritual beasts wanted to come out on their own. As a result, when that person summoned his spiritual beast, he saw a complete fish head, but the fish body had completely disappeared, not even the bones. Wow! That person was horrified. What's going on? He had never encountered such a situation in his life. In fact, he shouldn't have summoned his spiritual beast at this time. If he did, his spiritual beast would die. If he didn't summon it, according to the characteristics of the Soul Sea, it would eventually become a level 1 spiritual beast. At the moment when that person's spiritual beast disappeared, Han Fei knew that this matter had been exposed. However, he didn't care. He would eat as much as he could. The Chu sect was so big and there were so many people. He didn't believe there would be no food. Baji, Baji, finally, there was a commotion in the Chu sect cultivation tower. Someone exclaimed, "Everyone, pay attention, summon your spiritual beasts, hurry up, first." Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1493. At this moment, many people in the Chu sect cultivation tower suddenly woke up. After the accident, they immediately called for help. However, things like cultivation were usually done alone in absolute silence. Some people would even set up a restriction formation in their mansions to ensure the effect of their cultivation. After a while, 30 or 40 people gathered under the cultivation tower, all of whom looked solemn. Someone said in a panic, "How is it? How's your spiritual beast?" Someone shouted angrily, "Damn, my spiritual beast has become a level 1 spiritual beast." Someone said with a gloomy face, "When I summoned it, it died." Someone was so angry that his face turned red. "Half of my spiritual beast was bitten, and it only has a breath left. But I don't dare to take it back." An honorable one suddenly appeared in this place. Before this, there were naturally people who went to report. As soon as this person came, he shouted, "What happened? Lord Feng, something happened to all our spiritual beasts, damn it." Before the man could finish his sentence, he saw an explorer carrying a big turtle directly jump down from the cultivation tower. Everyone was stunned by the appearance of the big turtle. Half of the turtle's neck was bitten off, and blood was flowing out of the turtle's shell. There was only one limb left. The inside of the shell was basically empty, and it was definitely going to die. Chu Feng immediately thought of one thing. A few years ago, in the Sky Meditation Garden, the spiritual beasts of many young disciples of the families all became level 1 spiritual beasts. As a venerable, he naturally knew more than these peak-level law enforcers or explorers. He had heard the speculation of the Soul Sea. His face changed drastically, and a terrifying pressure fell directly on the cultivation tower. Bam, a large number of restrictions were directly broken. Many people who didn't have an accident thought that something big had happened. These people walked out of the cultivation tower one after another. When they saw that many people had gathered below, they were all dumbfounded. Someone asked doubtfully, "What happened? Lord Feng?" Chu Feng shouted, "Everyone, immediately summon all your spiritual beasts." There were still many people who didn't know what was going on. Suddenly, someone's expression changed, and he hurriedly summoned his spiritual beast. As a result, he saw a shark that had been bitten into a hornet's nest fall directly to the ground. Its body was basically hollowed out. The man stared blankly at this scene and couldn't believe his eyes. "Fuck, am I dreaming?" Seeing this, the others also quickly summoned their spiritual beasts. For a time, all kinds of spiritual beasts suddenly filled the outer square of the Chu sect cultivation tower. As a result, all sorts of exclamations could be heard. In particular, those peak-level law enforcers had dozens of spiritual beasts that had become level 1 pets. This problem was too serious. The group of people looked at each other in dismay. For a moment, they were either angry or at a loss, in the Soul Sea. When Han Fei found that all the spiritual beasts around him were gone, he felt terrible. These were all great tonics. In this short period of time, Little Black and Little White had stabilized their level 70 realm and directly reached level 71. After the breakthrough, Han Fei ate nearly 30 spiritual beasts. Han Fei felt that if he had another half an hour, Little Black and Little White would be able to level up again. However, the moment those creatures left, the rest were particularly dazzling. At this moment, Han Fei saw a hollow nether fish. The hollow nether fish was a kind of fish that could turn invisible and had extremely strong spiritual power. If it were other spiritual beasts, they might not be able to see it. However, Little Black and Little White's eyes could naturally see through the void. In Han Fei's eyes, information popped up. Name a hollow nether fish, Chu Feng's spiritual beast. Introduction: This is an extremely lazy fish that will enter a state of stealth after a long period of stillness. The hollow nether fish's spiritual power is extremely strong. It can easily pierce with its spiritual power, kill creatures below its level, and devour a small part of the enemy's soul. Level 81 Quality Exotic, Ultra Quality. The hollow nether fish obviously saw Little White and the Emperor Sparrow too. At this moment, the Emperor Sparrow was no longer level 9, but level 16, because it had just digested again. Han Fei had to admit that the speed of digestion and growth was amazing. Without any hesitation, Han Fei rushed up, his mouth wide open. However, the hollow nether fish seemed to feel threatened and directly launched a soul explosion. However, it underestimated Little Black's level. As soon as the soul explosion was launched, Han Fei controlled Little Black to bite the hollow nether fish's head. In the outside world, Chu Feng was delivering the message to Chu Menwang, when his face suddenly changed. In the next moment, his hollow nether fish appeared. However, what made his blood freeze was that half of his spiritual beast's head had been bitten off. At this moment, as soon as it came out of the soul sea, the hollow nether fish's head began to grow again. After all, it was a venerable creature. Ordinary venerables could be reborn from a single drop of blood, so could naturally endowed spiritual beasts. Chu Feng said with an awful face, "This time, I must ask the family leader about the soul sea. If it's not in the soul sea, why are so many people's spiritual beasts, including mine, being attacked?" Chu Feng even felt that in the spiritual beasts world, something was maliciously slaughtering the spiritual beasts of the Chu family. In the Soul Sea, the Emperor Sparrow flew to Han Fei's head again and stuck its beak into its big mouth. Han Fei was speechless. "I haven't finished it yet. Don't you feel that you're drooling?" Anyway, Little Black had eaten quite a lot. It didn't matter if it was just 1 or 2 mouthfuls. Han Fei spat out the half of the fish head that he had bitten off. The monarch sparrow picked up an eyeball from the blood mist with its beak and swallowed it. One eyeball made the Emperor Sparrow level up. Han Fei was speechless. Why didn't he take advantage of this period to upgrade the Emperor Sparrow's level? He could even feed it with spirit awakening fluid. In any case, he had plenty of these resources, and he could produce them as much as he wanted. Thousands of kilometers away, Old Monster Chu and Sect King Chu were looking for Han Fei to find out where he had gone. Suddenly, Chu Feng said to them via voice transmission, "Ancestor, Master, something happened at home." Chu Feng's words made Old Monster Chu and Sect King Chu look at each other in bewilderment. Both of them realized that Han Fei had gone to the Chu sect. They couldn't figure it out even if they racked their brains. If Han Fei had joined the Chu sect, wouldn't he have died? Was he out of his mind? Old Monster Chu shouted, "All the strong masters of the Chu sect, go home." Swish! Swish! After a while, when Old Monster Chu saw the group of level 1 spiritual beasts, his face became extremely dark. Old Monster Chu muttered, "What happened back then was really done by that kid." Sect King Chu narrowed his eyes and shouted, "All the disciples of the clan, immediately summon your spiritual beasts and open the array of the Chu sect. Everyone in the Chu sect is not allowed to leave the Chu sect without permission. Anyone who disobeys will die." Sect King Chu sent a voice transmission to the entire Chu sect. This was quite a big move. The Chu sect occupied the entire Cold Moon Island and had a population of hundreds of millions. Of course, there were also some forces belonging to the Chu sect. The Chu sect alone occupied 1/3 of the size of Cold Moon Island. As soon as this order was issued, countless people summoned their spiritual beasts and waited for the screening. In Chu Zhao's small yard. After hearing the voice transmission, the little maid hurriedly ran to Chu Zhao's room, holding a red octopus in her hand. "Young master, something happened. Hurry up and summon your spiritual beasts." Chu Zhao frowned. "I heard that. Didn't I tell you to go?" "Young master, I won't go." "Hurry up and summon it." A big purple lobster appeared in the room. Chu Zhao pondered for a while and said, "Ling, go to your room. Something must have happened in the clan. There should be the perception of strong masters scanning here. Don't stay here." "Young master, are you really okay?" The little girl held the big octopus and asked with concern. Chu Zhao shook his head. "There are many strong masters in the clan. It's not your turn to worry." After driving the little girl away, Chu Zhao was shocked. What on earth did Han Fei do? How did he force the patriarch to order the whole clan to summon their spiritual beasts? Why did he summon his spiritual beasts? However, at this moment, Han Fei had disappeared without a trace. Chu Xiao was also very puzzled. What on earth did he do? Just when Chu Xiao was struggling in his heart, he heard a voice in Chu Xiao's mind, "There's no problem with your choice. On the path of cultivation, of course, it's for your own good. The Chu sect abandoned you. What do you owe the Chu sect? From now on, don't speak, and don't mention the name Han Fei. No matter what happens, just pretend to be cultivating. Otherwise, you will not be able to escape death." Chu Xiao was about to ask, but the voice said, "If you have any questions, just think about it in your heart." Chu Xiao asked, "Are you Han Fei?" The old turtle cackled. "I'm the emperor." God knew what story the old turtle told Chu Xiao. At this moment, Han Fei was very depressed. The Chu sect king was decisive enough. If he found a straggler, he would swallow it directly. After all, there were so many people in the Chu sect. After all, there would be a few stupid people who couldn't respond to the call in time and summon their spiritual beasts. However, Han Fei didn't panic at all. Chu Xiao was under the control of the old turtle. And he had to stay here. If you're a member of the Chu sect, why don't you carry your spiritual beasts on your back every day? Otherwise, I'll definitely eat you up. Second. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1494. The Chu sect was extremely powerful, and the population of the main branch alone was hundreds of thousands of people. At this moment, they were all in a mess. Everyone's spiritual beasts were with them. When these people met each other, they were all dumbfounded. Chu Men King couldn't help it. Han Fei had somehow slaughtered the spiritual beasts with high-end combat power in the Chu sect. Although the Chu sect had a large number of people, they couldn't withstand a venerable slaughtering spiritual beasts at will in the legendary Soul Sea. In fact, Chu sect king had long known that Han Fei would retaliate and the Chu sect would inevitably suffer losses. However, he didn't expect that there was a problem with the Soul Sea. After this incident, the prestige of the Chu sect would inevitably be damaged. However, as the head of the family, he had to be decisive and minimize the losses. Damage prestige? As long as he killed the enemy, he could take it back. At this time, the Chu sect's array had been opened. Chu sect king was sure that Han Fei had no reason to escape. But what Chu sect king didn't expect was that since Han Fei had come, he didn't intend to escape at all. Han Fei thought to himself, "Your Chu sect is so aggressive. Do you really think I won't cause trouble?" At this moment, Han Fei didn't panic at all. By right, the Chu sect should be investigating the people in their clan at this moment. They would even tentatively let some weak people put their spiritual beasts in the Soul Sea. Han Fei was not in a hurry and decided to wait and see the effect. Unfortunately, this Soul Sea couldn't be connected with the outside world. Otherwise, he and the old tortoise would have been able to send the Chu sect into a state of disarray. Of course, Han Fei also felt the existence of stronger spiritual beasts. The meaning that Little White conveyed to Han Fei was that those spiritual beasts were all beyond his ability. Han Fei thought, "That's true. Those who dared to put their spiritual beasts in the Soul Sea in such a situation must be very confident in their spiritual beasts." Han Fei knew that he couldn't hunt high-level venerable spiritual beasts for the time being. This kind of creature could be reborn from a drop of blood and he couldn't kill them even if he wanted to. After all, the current strength of Little Black and Little White was still limited. Wait, Han Fei thought to himself, it's not entirely impossible. In fact, I can also try. The supreme yin-yang will slice through everything. What if it killed one? Of course, Han Fei didn't attack blindly. After devouring some more powerful spiritual beasts and leveling up to 72, he would hunt them again. In any case, even if the hunt failed, escaping was not a problem. As for the other party's spiritual beast, this was not something that would usually happen. Han Fei had been wondering if there were any rules in the Soul Sea that he didn't know. For example, when he entered the Soul Sea for the first time, he was still on a boat in the level 2 fishery. He saw an iron hook squid in his Soul Sea. The squid's first reaction when it saw Little White was to attack. Because of this, Han Fei speculated that spiritual beasts would also fight each other in the Soul Sea. After all, primitive spiritual beasts would also kill each other. However, Han Fei no longer sensed that other spiritual beasts wanted to hunt Little Black and Little White. In the past, he only thought that Little Black was very fierce. Those creatures that encountered it would be lucky if they were not bitten to death. Who would dare to come up and bite Little White? But today, Han Fei found that he had already killed so many spiritual beasts. Those spiritual beasts were a little confused. They seemed to only know how to fight back in all directions, but they wouldn't directly attack Little White. This meant that they didn't attack their targets. However, Little White was clearly there, and they could also see it, but they just didn't attack. Why? This made Han Fei re-examine this problem. When he entered the Soul Sea for the first time, someone attacked him when his consciousness was immersed in the Soul Sea. At that time, it was because that person was about to hunt him. Therefore, his spiritual beast had a clear consciousness and wanted to attack Little White. Han Fei suddenly realized something. Could it be that when two people were fighting in reality, in fact, it was very likely that a battle was also breaking out in the Soul Sea at the same time? However, most people would basically fuse with their spiritual beasts when fighting. However, even so, there should be strange incidents of spiritual beasts suddenly dying. Or, some people's spiritual beasts inexplicably became level 1. He had never paid attention to this kind of case. When he went back in the future, he would have to check it carefully. As far as Han Fei's current conclusion was, the attitude of the enemy in reality was very likely to determine the attitude of the spiritual beast in the Soul Sea. Therefore, the relationship between the master and the spiritual beast might be closer than everyone thought. They were so close that their soul, mind, and consciousness were extremely synchronized. Understanding this, Little Black's eyes rolled a few times, and then he swam towards the extremely dangerous spiritual beast. Ah, the Emperor Sparrow let out a cry. Its voice no longer sounded like it had been stabbed, but a cry of excitement. It seemed to be encouraging Han Fei, hurry up and attack. This guy seemed to be adding fuel to the fire. Han Fei didn't dare to annoy this guy at this moment. He was doing something big. If he annoyed this guy, he would immediately get into trouble. He didn't even have a place to cry. In the conference hall of the Chu sect, King Chu had quickly issued an announcement. King Chu shouted to a group of core members who were explorers and law enforcers, "What exactly happened to your spiritual beasts? Let's talk about it later. Let's talk about the most important thing first. You should all know about Han Fei. This person has sneaked into our Chu sect. Now I suspect that he has a way to enter the Soul Sea and is concentrating on hunting the spiritual beasts of the masters of our clan." Wow! Many people took a breath, and someone exclaimed, "The Soul Sea really exists?" Someone was shocked. "How did we find this guy?" Someone was horrified. "I heard that this guy has already become a venerable. How could he sneak into the Chu sect in front of the family master?" King Chu didn't care about the various voices below. He shouted, "I need you to screen everyone in the clan. If I find anyone who doesn't pay attention, don't blame me for being ruthless." After a while, King Chu issued some inspection methods and Han Fei's ability again, and then he sent all these people away. When all the experts below the Venerable Realm had left, a total of 6 people, including old eccentric Chu, appeared. Plus King Chu, there were a total of 7 people here. This was the current strength of the Chu sect. Old Monster Chu said, "Chu Feng, tell me what happened just now." Chu Feng stood up. "Ancestor, under the cultivation tower just now, there were indeed many people whose spiritual beasts were gnawed, and some of them became level 1 spiritual beasts. So, I have several speculations about the Soul Sea." Old Monster Chu said lightly, "Go ahead." Chu Feng said, I've noticed that when the spiritual beasts were gnawed, they were still alive when they came out. However, this vitality was soon gone. This means that when they were attacked and seriously injured, they were not dead, but about to die. So, when those creatures were summoned, they were being attacked. Old Monster Chu nodded slightly. Continue. Chu Feng said, it's incredible that their spiritual beasts became level 1. If Han Fei let his spiritual beasts gnaw and kill other people's spiritual beasts, why did his spiritual beasts become level 1 after being gnawed? I suspect that if the spiritual beasts die in the Soul Sea, they will not really die but retain their original form. The ones who died were all summoned. Old Monster Chu's eyes lit up. Yes, continue. Being praised by the ancestor, Chu Feng said, I'm wondering why Han Fei still broke into the Chu sect when he knew that it was unfathomable. Of course, he could attack the spiritual beasts of some strong masters. But with his strength alone, he won't be able to shake the foundation of our Chu sect. Then why did he come? Old Monster Chu said leisurely, maybe. If he wants to hunt the spiritual beasts of the strong masters of the Chu sect, he must get close to the Chu sect first. Chu Feng immediately said, that's right. In reality, the closer we are, the closer the spiritual beasts of both sides will be in the Soul Sea. Old Monster Chu nodded. This analysis is very insightful. Feng, not bad. Chu Feng was overjoyed. Thank you for your praise, ancestor. However, what I don't know is why the spiritual beasts can't describe what the Soul Sea looks like and what they encounter in the Soul Sea. Old Monster Chu said, the Soul Sea is mysterious and extraordinary, but no one in this world has really seen it. It seems that Han Fei has indeed mastered some secrets that we don't know at all. So, if we catch Han Fei, we can find all the answers. Old Monster Chu's face was slightly cold. My home is not big. I want you to find him yourself. This kid is the #1 scourge of our Chu sect. His degree of danger is even comparable to that of the Chao family. When Old Monster Chu said this, everyone, including Old Monster Chu, looked at him in surprise. Can he be compared with the Chao family? Aren't you overestimating Han Fei? Old Monster Chu snorted coldly. Don't underestimate this person. This person has escaped from me 3 times. 8 years ago, he still had Han Guanshu to help him. But now, he can already deal with me by himself. Do you still think this kid is simple? Old Monster Chu spoke highly of Han Fei. He firmly believed that Han Fei had obtained too many opportunities in the Divine Palace recorded in the historical materials. A semi-venerable, almost a peak-level junior venerable in less than a year? The strongest combat power he exerted was even comparable to that of a peak-level advanced venerable. How could such a terrifying person be kept alive? And just when Old Monster Chu ordered to search for Han Fei, one of the people in the lower seats suddenly changed his face. Come out. In front of everyone, half a wind thunder flood dragon appeared in the conference hall of the Chu sect. Uncle Jun, what's wrong with you? Chu Jun said with an ugly face, Han Fei dares to hunt my wind thunder flood dragon. What should I do? The 3rd chapter. Moi, end of this chapter. Chapter 1495. It was not easy to kill a venerable spiritual beast. Han Fei was fast enough. He got into the mouth of the wind thunder flood dragon by himself. Then, he activated the supreme yin-yang wheel in its body. In an instant, the wind thunder flood dragon was cut into 7 or 8 pieces. All of this happened in just a second. The wind thunder flood dragon was pulled out of Forge the Universe. And around the wind thunder flood dragon, the other venerable spiritual beasts all became vigilant and entered a fighting state. This was the difference between venerable spiritual beasts and other ordinary spiritual beasts. However, what shocked Han Fei was not the strength of these spiritual beasts, but their number. Plus the spiritual beast that was killed by him, there were a total of 7 venerable spiritual beasts here. The growth of spiritual beasts was based on the growth limit of their masters. This meant that there were 7 venerables in the Chu sect. However, Although the wind thunder flood dragon called Chu Jun managed to escape, it only managed to escape with a portion of its body. The rest was still eaten by Han Fei. Ah, the imperial sparrow followed him, groaning and eating. He had to admit that the effect of high-level spiritual beasts was really different. The imperial sparrow upgraded again. Although Little Black and Little White hadn't upgraded yet, Han Fei had already felt that they were not far away from upgrading. 3 days later. In the house where Chu Xiao was, someone knocked on the door and shouted, "Chu Xiao, open the door, Chu Xiao." After a while, Little Ling opened the door and said, "What are you doing?" "Our young master is cultivating." Someone sneered. Cultivating? From a law enforcer to a hanging fisher. If he continues to cultivate, won't he become a dangling fisher? Little Ling said angrily, "Our young master will definitely be able to cultivate back." Bam, these people were not interested in wasting their breath on a little girl. With a blast of air, the little girl flew out and fell heavily to the ground. These people were accompanied by their spiritual beasts, big crabs, jellyfish, anti-heaven blades, soul-eating lobsters. They all bared their fangs and brandished their claws, rushing into the yard. "Chu Liang, what do you want? How dare you attack my people? Aren't you afraid of being punished by the law enforcement hall?" The guy called Chu Liang laughed at this moment. "The law enforcement hall will punish me? Chu Xiao, I'm afraid that you don't know the situation. You have to realize your place. You're just a peak-level hanging fisher. Law enforcement hall." Chu Xiao's face turned red. Of course, he knew why these people kept picking on him. Experts, especially geniuses, had always been very arrogant. He had once been one of the brightest stars of the Chu sect. In the past, it was not that he had never bullied others, and he had also enjoyed the flattery of these people. This Chu Liang and the few people around him were all trash who had flattered him before, but he couldn't even be bothered to look at them. Now, Chu Liang had actually reached the law enforcer realm. Therefore, he wanted to bully them. This was not the first time he had come to pick a fight. In the past, Chu Xiao's strength hadn't fallen too much, and Chu Liang hadn't become a law enforcer, so he didn't dare to mess around. Now that he had completely fallen from the level of a hidden fisher, Chu Liang naturally became bolder. Little Ling quickly got up and looked at Chu Xiao with a worried face. "Young master." Chu Xiao suppressed his inner anger and said in a low voice, "Chu Liang, what's the matter?" Chu Liang sneered, swaggered into the courtyard, and said lazily, "A strong master of the Chu sect has broken in. Unfortunately, as the strongest heavenly talent in this area, I have to be vigilant. But your small courtyard is closed all year round. Could it be that the thief is in your courtyard?" Chu Xiao sneered. "Ha! How can a strong master who can break into the Chu sect be in my small courtyard? Do you believe that?" Before Chu Xiao spoke, he heard another person say, "That's hard to say. What if you have been possessed and are no longer the original Chu Xiao?" Ha ha ha! After that person said that, Chu Liang and the others laughed. In fact, anyone who was possessed would usually become stronger crazily. How could someone's strength keep declining? Chu Liang hurriedly said, "Yes, this is very reasonable. I suspect that you may have been possessed. So, I want to test your strength with my own hands." "No. You're clearly bullying people." Little Ling stood in front of Chu Xiao. "You are already a law enforcer, but my young master is only a peak-level hanging fisher. You are doing this on purpose." Chu Liang slapped her, and Little Ling flew out again. Even then, Chu Liang still cursed, "What an eyesore. Since when does a little girl dare to be presumptuous in front of me?" Chu Xiao stared at Chu Liang fiercely and gritted his teeth. "Okay. Then let's have a fight." "Young master, no. You can't fight." Chu Xiao turned his head and scolded, "Shut up. I'd like to see how strong you are." Crack, crack, crack! A purple lobster quickly crawled out of the house. When they saw this purple gold lobster, Chu Liang and the others narrowed their eyes. Before, They had never dared to provoke Chu Xiao because of this purple gold lobster. However, the purple gold lobster was only level 55, only an intermediate hidden fisher. Even if it was a deterrent, it was not enough. Chu Liang chuckled. This is a battle between spiritual beasts. Let them solve it themselves. With that, a group of spiritual beasts surrounded the purple gold lobster. What was going to happen next could be imagined. Chu Xiao would never beg for mercy. As a heavenly talent, he wouldn't allow Chu Xiao to beg for mercy. Clang, clang, clang clang, clang, clang. The purple gold lobster was besieged and made all kinds of sounds. Fortunately, the purple gold lobster's defensive power was extremely strong. Although it was only an intermediate hidden fisher, its defensive power was comparable to that of an ordinary peak-level hidden fisher. However, the purple gold lobster could bear it, but Chu Xiao couldn't. At this moment, he was already lying on the ground. In just more than 2 minutes, he had been punched and kicked hundreds of times, and his body was covered with scars. Clang. Chu Liang stabbed a spear into the ground, stuck it by Chu Xiao's neck, and stepped on Chu Xiao's back. He sneered and said, "Look, where's your arrogance? Why is it gone?" Someone sneered. "Brother Liang, he has been crippled. How can he still be arrogant?" Someone sneered. Chu Xiao, who was once arrogant, has now been reduced to this. Sure enough, the river flows east for 30 years, and then west for 30 years. Chu Xiao spat out a mouthful of blood. "Kill me if you dare. Otherwise, I will kill you sooner or later." Chu Liang looked at him and his face darkened. "How dare you be so stubborn? Continue to beat me." Fighting and fighting were two completely different things. Just like now, Chu Xiao was beaten. This couldn't be regarded as a fight. He could only be beaten unilaterally. At this moment, Chu Xiao leaned against the bed in pain, and little Ling cried. "Young master, let's go to the law enforcement hall, elder, shall we?" Chu Xiao shook his head. "No. How can I not know the law enforcement hall of the Chu sect? I have lost my power, and the law enforcement hall will not help me." In the name of healing his wounds, Chu Xiao sent little Ling away. At this time, in Chu Xiao's heart, the old turtle's voice sounded leisurely. "You see, the rules of this world have always been set by the strong. Now, they are just here to bully you. If you wait for these people to grow up for a while, it will be almost impossible for you to survive in the Chu sect." How could Chu Xiao not know this? Otherwise, he would have given Han Fei and the others away. Chu Xiao asked, "Will you really help me repair the damage to my spiritual heritage?" The old turtle said leisurely, "No, it's Han Fei. He will, as long as you can play a big role." In the past 3 days, almost every morning, afternoon, and night, 3 times a day, there were people interrogating and questioning him, never stopping. In the conference hall of the Chu sect, the members of the elder group were all present. Someone said, "We can't go on like this." The 3-day search yielded no results. Could it be that Han Fei had already escaped when he attacked? Someone also frowned and said, "Yes, the mountain protecting array consumes a lot of energy every day. If this goes on, people will be in a panic." Someone said, "Master, why don't we let some people's spiritual beasts return? Can we detect if Han Fei is still there?" The 7 venerables searched for 3 days, but to no avail. Even the pure black shadow that old monster Chu said couldn't be found. At this time, even King Chu guessed that Han Fei had probably run away. King Chu said, "Let all the disciples below the hidden fisher realm take back their spiritual beasts. In addition, arrange 1,000 hidden fishers to take back their spiritual beasts, and 100 law enforcers to take back their spiritual beasts." Han Fei wandered in the Soul Sea for 3 days and ate some primitive spiritual beasts. He was not in a hurry anyway. It was no big deal that the Scattered Stars Island was missing him. Besides, Shueishenqi was still there. Suddenly, before Little White said anything, Han Fei felt that the number of spiritual beasts around him suddenly increased, and then more and more. After a while, they were everywhere. Little White, find a spiritual beast above level 70. Huh. Very few. How many? 3 to 5. What about those above level 80? No. Han Fei sneered in his heart. This is fishing, luring me to take the bait. However, I won't be fooled by this. The Soul Sea is here now, but I don't know when it will come again. How can I leave so easily? Another 3 days passed. The number of inspections of the Chu sect changed from 3 times a day to once a day. He really couldn't find any. There was nothing he could do. 3 days later, the spiritual beasts of law enforcers and explorers returned to the Soul Sea one after another. However, oh. Not good, my spiritual beast has died. Hurry up and summon your spiritual beasts. Han Fei, that scoundrel hasn't left yet. King Chu was furious. This guy is still in the Chu sect. Where is he hiding? King Chu ordered, those above the law enforcer realm, summon your spiritual beasts. Old Monster Chu appeared in the conference hall with an ugly face. Good. No wonder he is Han Guanchu's son. Chapter 1496. In the Soul Sea. After hunting for a while, Little Black and Little White successfully advanced to level 73. Then, those spiritual beasts went out again. When these spiritual beasts were summoned for the second time, Han Fei didn't continue to wait but quickly hunted primitive spiritual beasts. Finally, after half a day, Little Black and Little White failed to break through to level 74. They seemed to be stuck. At this time, the horrible feeling came again, and Han Fei's consciousness returned to forge the universe. As soon as he came back to his senses, Han Fei still felt a slight headache. After a few minutes, it gradually improved. The old turtle said, "My consciousness has been away from my body for too long. Don't worry about it. Did you swallow a lot of spiritual beasts in the Soul Sea?" Han Fei got up and said lightly, "Not many, just a few hundred." The old turtle really wanted to roll his eyes at Han Fei. "The spiritual beasts that I worked so hard to cultivate were eaten by you casually. Just a few hundred. How many more do you want to eat?" Han Fei asked, "Old Yuan, what's the situation outside? Is Chu Xiao okay?" The old turtle said, "Chu Xiao has a deep hatred for the Chu sect. He has been persuaded by me to completely betray the Chu sect. You can make use of him to do something." Han Fei sneered. "What can Chu Xiao do now? He is disabled and can no longer integrate into the law enforcement circle. No one will like him. Low-level groups are not my targets. What do you think he can do?" The old turtle said, "That's not true. Everyone has their own meaning of existence. It's normal for one's luck to fluctuate. His damaged spiritual heritage can be solved with just a heavenly awakening divine technique. But God knows what kind of revenge he will do to the Chu sect." Han Fei froze for a moment and then thought, his spiritual heritage suddenly improved. People will definitely find out that something is wrong, right? The old turtle said leisurely, "Who do you think will care about an outdated heavenly talent who has wasted 7 or 8 years? There are many examples of a person bursting out after enduring for a long time. He just needs to stop cultivating for the time being. Although his spiritual heritage will be repaired, his strength will not improve. Of course, it will also improve very quickly." Han Fei suddenly had an idea. He grinned and said, "Old Yuan, it's me. I realized that you're the worst." The old tortoise said leisurely, "No, I'm not as bad as you." 2 days later. This time, Chu Men King sent a hidden fisher to test the waters, and there wouldn't be any problem. However, the experts would rather take their spiritual beasts with them than put them into their soul seas to test it. But these people didn't know that Han Fei had already come out of the Soul Sea. In these 2 days, Chu Xiao's courtyard was not completely quiet. Chu Xiao asked Ling to visit a few of his former law enforcers. Those people were once weaker than him. Therefore, Chu Xiao planned to buy some resources with the secret method. But, that day, Chu Xiao's courtyard was kicked open again. It was the same Chu Liang from 2 days ago, but this time, he only brought 2 people with him. Chu Liang shouted coldly, "Where is Chu Xiao? Get out here." Little Ling had already blocked Chu Xiao's door. She said stubbornly, "Young master, don't come out. This bad guy is up to no good." Chu Liang sneered, "You little girl, you only know how to get in the way all day. Don't worry, as long as your young master is sensible today, I can spare your young master." Creak. The door opened, and Chu Xiao, with a pale face, put a hand on little Ling, her shoulder. "Get out of the way." Young master, Chu Xiao pushed little Ling, away and walked straight to Chu Liang, his eyes cold as if looking at a dead person. "Speak." Chu Liang was speechless. "Fuck, you're already like this. Why are you still so arrogant?" Chu Liang wanted to kick him to death. However, Chu Liang knew that Chu Xiao was arrogant. He came with a purpose today, not to fight. Chu Liang smiled and said, "Chu Xiao, don't say that I didn't give you a chance. Back then, you were very mean to everyone. I might as well tell you what happened in the past. I just wanted to get back at you. If you want me to not get back at you, fine. I know you have a secret method, Wind's Spirit Finger. Give it to me, and I won't bother you anymore." Little Ling, was shocked. "Young master, those people," Chu Xiao shouted in a low voice, "shut up." Little Ling's face was pale. Those people used to be members of her young master's team. But now, they betrayed her young master. It was too much. Chu Xiao was silent for a long time. Chu Liang thought that Chu Xiao was arrogant again, so he immediately said, "Chu Xiao, a wise man submits to circumstances. As the saying goes, an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. Give it to me, and I won't have time to bother you in the future." Chu Xiao raised his head slightly. "Okay." Chu Liang's eyes flashed. He didn't expect that Chu Xiao would agree. Although he also came with a task, he must have a share of the Wind Spirit Finger. Chu Xiao turned over his hand and handed a jade slip to Chu Liang. "From now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other." Chu Liang was not in the mood to find fault at this moment. It was said that this secret method was one of Chu Xiao's strongest secret methods. He had to go back and make a copy. After a while, when Chu Liang and the others left, Chu Xiao looked back at little Ling, "This has nothing to do with you. It's just a secret technique. If it's gone, then it's gone. I still have more." However, little Ling, still kept apologizing. In the end, Chu Xiao simply ignored her. After Chu Liang obtained the Wind Spirit Finger, he sent away his 2 followers, promised them some benefits, and impatiently returned home. Chu Liang grabbed the jade slip and sneered, "Chu Xiao, tut, I didn't expect that you would have such a day. Ha, you want me to let you off with just a mere Wind Spirit Finger? What a fool's dream." When Chu Liang's perception swept over, his whole body suddenly stiffened. But then, everything returned to normal. However, Chu Liang's expression was no longer that excited. Instead, he revealed a strange smile. Law enforcers were considered experts in the Chu sect and could go to many places. However, Chu Liang didn't give it to Chu Xiao's former teammates. Because, when little Ling had found those people, they had already fallen into the trap. One of Han Fei's great paths had been replaced by the soul-splitting path, a low-level great path, but a mature one. Nothing happened that day. However, communication between people was essential every day. Especially those investigators, who went from house to house to investigate, coming and going every day. Besides, Han Fei didn't care about the spiritual beasts of those people below the law enforcer realm. Therefore, none of these people had an accident. Everyone had the same thought, since that strong expert could sneak into the Chu sect, why would he come after them? Nothing happened for 2 days. Nothing happened for 3 days. After 7 days, ordinary people might not know, but the entire Chu sect had been searched by the 7 venerables more than a dozen times. Even Chu Xiao, a cripple, had been swept by the souls of venerables no less than 20 times. Of course, the Chu sect had cleaned up the sect this time. Han Fei didn't find anyone, but the spies of the other major families found hundreds of people. The spies of the 7 major sects also found hundreds of people. These people were killed the moment they were discovered. They did not show any mercy at all. And more than 20 people controlled by Han Fei's soul-splitting path had died. However, even old Monster Chu didn't think that these people were controlled, only that they were men of sacrifice. As soon as they were found, their souls had been destroyed. 7 days later, King Chu issued an order, announcing that the crisis had been resolved. However, those above the explorer realm would still take their spiritual beasts with them. They didn't want to take the risk. However, after a day or two, no one said that their spiritual beasts were killed. Only then did some explorers try to take back their spiritual beasts. Within a day, they summoned their spiritual beasts more than a dozen times, but nothing happened. This kind of test lasted for 3 days before everyone was sure that there was no abnormality in the Soul Sea. In the conference hall of the Chu sect, someone said, "We still need to observe for a while. If Han Fei really doesn't attack anymore, it means that the crisis of the Soul Sea has been resolved. This shows that even if Han Fei can affect the Soul Sea, it won't last very long, probably between 5 to 10 days. Someone said, "The Chu sect's array hasn't been loosened, so we can't take it lightly." Han Fei was very cunning. If we can't find anything, it means that he must be planning something else. Someone shook his head. "I think he might just be hiding. For example, he might be disguised as someone. This kid's disguise skill is really good. Now, there must be something that we have overlooked." Boom! Suddenly, a violent explosion resounded through the entire Chu sect. The venerables looked at each other and disappeared from the conference hall at the same time. Boom, boom, boom! Almost at the same time, terrifying explosions took place in hundreds of places in the Chu sect. Demonic energy. Old Monster Chu and the others were surprised. The entire Chu sect was filled with demonic energy, which was the aftermath of the explosion. Damn it, did Han Fei cooperate with the sea demons? Chu Feng said coldly, "No one survived. All of them self-destructed and erupted with demonic energy at the same time. It must be Han Fei's doing." At this moment, the sky above the Chu sect was full of strong masters. All the young disciples below the hidden fissure level had left the house. That explosion covered a range of hundreds of kilometers, directly covering all the areas of the Chu sect, causing countless casualties. Chu Jun gnashed his teeth and said, "Bastard, this kid doesn't care about the casualties of ordinary disciples at all. He wants to destroy our Chu sect." Suddenly, old Monster Chu clawed at the cultivation tower with his sky-ripping claw. There was a distortion there, billions of demonic energy spread out, and the entire cultivation tower collapsed. Time freeze. King Chu hurriedly blocked it with his Dao. Seeing this scene from a distance, Han Fei was shocked. The power of a peak-level venerable should not be underestimated. The explosion of 3 billion demonic energy was blocked by his Dao. Old Monster Chu took the opportunity to fish out more than 300 strong masters in the cultivation tower. Almost at the same time, Chu Feng, Chu Jun, and the others grabbed at this group of strange people. Boom, boom, boom. The 7 venerables crushed more than 50 people, but more than 50 explosions were triggered around them. Han Fei's voice echoed in the air. "Old Monster Chu, is this game fun? If you want to play, I'll continue to play with you. If you don't want to play, open the seal and let 1,000,000 people leave Cold Moon Island together. Otherwise, I'll play with your Chu sect to the end."